Cloud recording started.
Good afternoon, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing for the Committee on Economic Development, joint with the Oversight and Investigation. At this time, we ask that council members and staff please turn on their video for verification purposes. To minimize disruptions, please place cell phones and electronic devices to vibrate or silent. If you have testimony you wish to submit for the record, you may do so via email at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. We thank you for your cooperation. Chairs, we are ready to begin.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I will first and foremost say thank you so much for your patience and welcome to this joint hearing of the Economic Development and Oversight and Investigations Committees of the New York City Council. Today is Monday, March 21st, 2022. My name is Amanda Farias, and I have the privilege of chairing this hearing alongside my colleague, Councilmember Gail Brewer, Chair of the Oversight and Investigations Committee. Today, we're also joined by Council members Williams, Lewis, Velasquez, Kagan, and Yeager. Thank you to my colleagues for joining today. Today's hearing marks the first opportunity this council session for these committees to hear testimony from the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, an office created in 2014 with the goal of transforming the city's workforce development strategies by coordinating and improving the city's many workforce development programs. The focus of this hearing will be to check in on how initiatives from the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Department of Small Business Services were progressing prior to the COVID-19 crisis, how those initiatives have adapted to the challenging circumstances created by the pandemic, as well as what plans lie ahead for the city's various workforce development programs. In 2014, the Office of Workforce Development's Career Pathways Plan outlines a shift in the city's workforce development strategy from so-called rapid attachment programs, which presented limited opportunities for upward mobility, to a system that envisioned city agencies partnering with major industries to ensure that job seekers would be trained in skills sought by employers. This way, job training agencies could ensure that people who emerge from their programs are able to find quality work. The idea was that this type of system would improve the quality of the city's workforce, while at the same time, increasing accountability among city agencies that conduct job training programs. For the first 5 years of the original Career Pathways framework development, the city's economy set records in the number of jobs created and touted the lowest unemployment level since the 2008 financial crisis. In October 2019, the city's unemployment rate was a very healthy 3.6%. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit shortly thereafter, and all that growth was wiped away in a matter of months. The year from October 2019 to October 2020 was devastating for the city's economy. Over 550,000 New Yorkers lost their jobs, and by June 2020, the city's unemployment rate hit a high 20.4%. Fortunately, as vaccines became widely available and as the worst days of the pandemic thankfully appear to have receded, these numbers have gradually recovered. By January 2022, the unemployment rate had fallen to 7.3%, and the city's economy recovered over 288,000 jobs from the year before. Nonetheless, many New Yorkers are still struggling. In its recent update to the Career Pathways Plan, the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development outlined the impact of the pandemic upon the city's workforce development infrastructure and how the city's low-income communities suffered the hardest, both from job losses and from the disease. We hope to hear from the Office of Workforce Development on what it is doing to assist those hardest hit by the pandemic, and whether the new administration is shifting its priorities to protect the city's most vulnerable residents at a time where we require an all hands on deck to refocus recovery on pre-pandemic numbers. In 2020, the Office of Workforce Development updated its work with the 5 industry partnerships contained in the Career Pathways Plan: healthcare, technology, construction, food and beverage, and industrial manufacturing. Each of these industry partnership working groups developed its own plan to combat unemployment during the pandemic, and we would like to discuss how those have performed today as well. Additionally, the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity developed a data portal in coordination with the Office of Workforce Development to serve as a workforce hub for city employment resources and programs. The portal was designed to serve as a resource for job seekers, but the data contained in the portal suggests that at least 55,000 out of 450,000 participants attended multiple workforce development agency programs since 2017. That means that over 12% of the time, the city is duplicating work for job seekers. We would like to unpack those numbers today and see what that means for agency spending. Finally, the Economic Development Corporation and the Department of Small Business Services have rolled out their own initiatives, both standalone and in coordination with each other or the Office of Workforce Development to bring jobs back to the city. EDC has launched several programs since the pandemic hit, including a $7.8 million cybersecurity bootcamp called Cyber NYC, entrepreneurship programs in Queens, salary negotiation workshops specifically for women, and awarding manufacturing grants to local businesses in the fashion industry. We on the committee look forward to hearing the progress of these programs and any other programs EDC would like to share with the committees here today. The committees hope to hear from the administration about the progress that has been made in adapting the career pathways framework to help the city's economy emerge from the pandemic, how the new administration is focusing its efforts towards improving the city's workforce development infrastructure, and what, if anything, the council can do in its legislative capacity to assist in those efforts. Before I turn it over to my co-chair, I'd like to take a moment to thank the staff on the Economic Development Committee, Legislative Counsel Alex Polinoff, Senior Policy Analyst William Hagak, and Principal Financial Analyst Aliyah Ali for all their hard work in putting this hearing together. With that said, I will now turn the floor over to my co-chair, Councilmember Gail Brewer, for her opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Barris. You're doing a great job as chair of this committee, and it's great to be with you. And I am Gail Brewer, Committee on Oversight and Investigations. And I think, as you just heard, we're going to look at some of the city's workforce development system. It is very fractured. I can say that there are 70 distinct programs in 21 different city agencies. As an example, you got DYCD with several different programs, particularly for young people, but not exclusively. CUNY with their wonderful 7 community colleges that need to be involved with SEEK and ASAP. Parks Department, HRA with many different workforce programs. SBS, I know we'll hear from you soon. We know certainly the Workforce One, but also they do construction. We have correction, libraries, disabilities, which is often forgotten, incredibly important. DOE, probation, NYCHA, the Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunities, the Workforce Development Board, and I just came from the National League of Cities. I think generally around the country, nobody knows what these workforce boards do. So I'm sure there are people on who can talk about it, but it's a challenge. And I don't think it was mentioned in the blueprint that the mayor just put out, but I might've missed it. And of course, there are many more, and there are state and federal agencies all working on the issue of what are we doing. And of course, I mentioned, I don't want to forget EDC, which is a big partner. So there really are 21 different places where you can enter the workforce system. And we, it's job training, it's placement, it's literacy, ELL, college access, career exploration, and many other topics, obviously young people. And there's millions of dollars at stake. New York alone spent $350 million on workforce development in FY21. And I think we can all argue that it could be improved. And I have to say, as somebody who's been around for a long time, as you know, I can think of Barbara Chang, I can think of Amy Peterson, I can think of Katie, all the people who headed up workforce in the city of New York, and we're still challenged. So my question to everybody, particularly our beloved Joey Ortiz, who I think this is hysterical that he used to tell us what to do, and now we can ask him to implement all his great ideas that he had for the last 20 years. And I love that he could possibly do it, and we'll work with you. But the question is, how are you as an administration, and how are we going to be different to make it work? I think you heard from before that the employment rate is 7.6%, is double the national rate. We know that the country as a whole has recovered a lot of jobs that it lost during the pandemic, maybe 90%. We've recovered only 70%. There's lots of reasons for that. But we know that New York has the skills and resources needed to have a great city, but we can't do without our workforce. Our workforce is what sets us apart. So I talked about the 70 different programs. There's not a lot of coordination. There's no single overarching vision. So it really is hard for people seeking jobs to navigate. And as you heard earlier, the data is not what it should be. There's lots of gaps in the services. And the data, as somebody who passed the open data bill, feels very strongly about it. The outcomes of workforce development programs are not available in a way that is easy for us to understand and to be able to compare different programs. I think you know that. Are we getting our investment? So I read the blueprint. I think the mayor produced it at Hunts Point, which was a good place to do it. But I think that, in my opinion, it was obviously well-intentioned and well-read, but there are an awful lot of task forces. I lost track. Almost every single aspect of what we're going to do had a task force attached to it. I have to say I would get rid of some of the task forces and actually do some of the implementation. And there's just lots of other aspects that I hope we discuss. One of the issues is just city government. We're one of the largest employers in the city of New York. How are we working to make sure that people get opportunity and that people who would normally come to be part of the city get a job? And obviously many agencies are looking for employees as we speak. I hope we talk about talent, not just workforce, because if we talk about coordinating workforce, I hope we're just not, I feel we're just going to be coordinating the 21 agencies and not talking about how we can match, which is the thing that Jonathan Bowles has talked about for the last, 30 years. How do you match the person who needs a job with the industry that needs the person? And of course, there's the whole issue of public-private, which has been an ongoing discussion. Even Mayor Bloomberg did not figure that out. So how do we actually make sure that the public-private relationship works? So those are some of the overall concepts. And I certainly want to thank the staff, Senior Policy Analyst Noah Mixer, Senior Counsel CJ Murray, Senior Financial Analyst Jack Kern, and in my office, Shula Puder, Leo Bolero, and Eddie Amador. And with that, I'll turn it back to you. And we will continue the hearing. I too apologize. I had technical problems and I know SBS had some technical problems also. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the sergeant and continue the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, chairs. My name is Alex Polinoff, and I'm going to be moderating the hearing today. I am counsel to the New York City Council's Committee on Economic Development. Before we begin, I want to remind everyone that you will be on mute until you are recognized to speak, at which time you will be unmuted by the Zoom host. If you mute yourself after you've been unmuted, you will need to be unmuted again by the host. So please be aware that there could be a delay in muting and unmuting, so just please be patient with us. The first panelist to give testimony today will be the First Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Small Business Services, Jackie Mallon. SBS's Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Development, Lucinda Glover, and the New York City Economic Development Corporation's Executive Vice President for Initiatives, Faye Penn, will be available for questioning as well. I will call on you each shortly when it is time to begin your testimony. During this hearing, if council members would like to ask a question of the administration or of a specific panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function, and I will call on you in order. We will be limiting the first round of council member questions to 3 minutes, which includes the time it takes to answer those questions. Before we begin testimony, I will administer the oath. To all members of the administration who will be offering testimony or will be available for questioning, please raise your right hands now. I will call on each of you individually for a response. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee today, and to respond honestly to council member questions? First Deputy Commissioner Mallon.
I do.
Deputy Commissioner Glover.
I do.
Executive Vice President Penn.
I do.
Thank you. First Deputy Commissioner Mallon, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chairs Farias and Brewer, and members of the Committee on Economic Development and Oversight and Investigations. My name is Jackie Mallon, and I'm the First Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. From SBS, I am joined by Deputy Commissioner Lucinda Glover, and from the New York City Economic Development Corporation, Executive Vice President for Initiatives, Faye Penn. I am pleased to testify today on the city's workforce development programs through the pandemic and on its plans for the future. At SBS, we aim to unlock economic potential and create economic security for all New Yorkers by connecting them to good jobs, creating stronger businesses, and building vibrant neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. SBS's Workforce Development Division is focused on delivering equitable and quality employment and training services leading to economic self-sufficiency and mobility for New York City's diverse communities. We work with industry partners to identify and develop high-quality training delivered directly to job seekers so that they can build the skills needed for in-demand jobs. The division also supports businesses in New York City by offering training opportunities for new and current employees and by sourcing candidates for job openings. SBS operates 18 Workforce One career centers across the city, connecting job seekers with employment opportunities, providing industry-informed trainings, and offering a variety of candidate development services, such as resume development, interview preparation, and job search workshops. From the outset of the pandemic, SBS immediately adapted the Workforce One Career Center services and training programs to an online model. Our virtual Workforce One Career Center system was launched less than 2 weeks after the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in New York City. Like many agencies, SBS had to shift its work to fight the pandemic directly. Efforts focused on connecting workers to fill critical staffing needs in nursing homes, community hospitals, and other essential service providers like grocery stores. SBS also led recruitment and training for the Vaccine for All Corps, which connected and employed people in their neighborhoods to help the vaccination effort on a local level. And we launched the Resource Navigator training program to train the New York City Test and Trace Corps. As non-essential businesses were forced to shutter, many New Yorkers found themselves without jobs either temporarily or long-term. When businesses started reopening and hiring additional staff, SBS hosted and participated in virtual hiring events and delivered career guidance and interview prep support to job seekers. We also launched the Career Discovery Program to help job seekers explore options and get free training in new fields. With Hospitality Hire, SBS connected workers to the hospitality industry when challenges arose from worker shortages. And SBS began a 28-week immersive training program called Future Code for New Yorkers with no previous professional web development experience to help them enter a career in tech. Overall, during the pandemic, SBS served over 130,000 people, connected 34,000 people to jobs, and trained over 11,000 New Yorkers, giving them new skills to advance their careers. As we enter a new phase of the pandemic, SBS continues to pivot toward the future, and part of that pivot means keeping what worked. Our virtual workforce centers are now preferred by many of our job seekers, giving them more flexibility to meet their needs. These new virtual services will be a core part of our work going forward, and just over a week ago, the mayor laid out a bold plan to return the city to pre-pandemic employment levels with a focus on equity and inclusivity, to provide opportunity to every New Yorker. Rebuild, Renew, Reinvent, a blueprint for New York City's economic recovery lays out 5 pillars with more than 70 concrete initiatives to create opportunities, connect New Yorkers seeking work, and help speed the recovery. Some key workforce items from the plan and SBS portfolio include expanding our pilot program that offers modest stipends to low-income and traditionally underserved participants in select occupational trainings, partnering with employers in the tech sector to meet their growing workforce needs with local diverse talent, upskilling New Yorkers for in-demand roles in the healthcare sector, including our nurse residency program and our programs that help foreign-trained nurses achieve New York State credentials, and bringing financial empowerment mobile units to neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs offering on-site assistance, including free tax prep, financial counseling, and job training enrollment. Some of the items in EDC's portfolio include expanding EDC's Business Development Office, which serves as a single point of contact to city government and helps businesses grow and prosper. This office has already created or retained about 3,700 jobs since its launch in January 2020. Doubling down on life science initiatives with a $1 billion investment to magnify New York City's impact on the global life sciences community, bringing more life science businesses to New York City and ensuring that New York City's growth benefits local New Yorkers. Jumpstarting a local green economy, leading with offshore wind, and building out EDC's work at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, which will bring 13,000 jobs. Working with local designs and manufacturing to develop an open restaurants kit of parts to drive local manufacturing and ease the transition for small restaurants to the permanent outdoor dining program. Working with the tech industry on diversity in the sector and tech for good. Supporting and diversifying the film and creative sectors, including through work at the Made in New York campus at Bush Terminal with a $500,000 square foot film production studio plus workforce commitments by Steiner Studios, and with a new 221,000 square foot garment manufacturing hub. And expanding business outreach and upgrading business technology with the Small Business Resource Network, which has already engaged with 27,700 businesses and built 243 websites. At SBS and EDC, we are committed to fulfilling Mayor Adams' clear and bold agenda to ensure the city's future economy is built on equity and inclusivity. We know that working closely with the City Council is critical to achieving this shared goal, and together we can rebuild, renew, and reinvent New York City. I look forward to our continued partnership and thank you for your time today. We welcome any questions that you may have.
Thank you, First Deputy Commissioner Mallon. I will now turn it over to questions from the chairs. Panelists from the administration, please, if possible, stay muted during this question and answer period. And then a reminder to both chairs, Farias and Brewer, that you will be in control of muting and unmuting yourselves during this period. Chairs, feel free to begin when ready.
Chair Farias, go ahead.
Thank you. Regretfully, the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development isn't present today to join us and discuss the plans, successes, challenges, and the future planning of our city. I am grateful to have each of you here from Small Business Services and EDC. So let's jump right in. So Workforce Development's founding document, the Career Pathways Plan that I mentioned earlier in my opening, originally called for establishing industry partnerships in 6 sectors of the economy. Like I said, tech, healthcare, food service, accommodation, construction, retail, industrial manufacturing. Has Workforce Development established effective industry partnerships in all 6 sectors? And if not, which sectors do we think or we feel post-pandemic still need industry partners?
Thank you for the question. Yes, you are correct. And in tech, healthcare, manufacturing, industrial, food service, and construction, we have established effective industry partnerships. I can give you some examples of what we consider successes. In tech, we've trained over 400 folks a year for jobs in tech as a result of models that were built by the Tech Talent Pipeline Industry Council. And those jobs are having people earn over $75,000, $80,000 a year, which is a great success. We've also did the CUNY 2X initiative, working with the CUNY system to double the number of computer science graduates into jobs, also those same high-paying jobs. In healthcare, we launched the nurse residency program, which served over 2,800 nurses, new graduate nurses, and helped them to both attach to the job and stay in the job, which was incredibly, we were incredibly lucky with that because we had started that before the pandemic and it was really crucial during the pandemic. In food service, we've launched a few apprenticeship programs focusing on trying to fill the gap in terms of line cooks. In industrial manufacturing, prior to the pandemic, we had the CNC machinist apprenticeship and are currently now working on advanced manufacturing. And so I guess what I'm saying is we found it to be very effective to work with industry to figure out where the jobs are in terms of the demand, have them work with us to design the training models. And it's a practice we will continue. One of the things that you said, like moving forward, what might be missing, part of what we have been thinking about in terms of construction is maybe expanding to cover like climate change and resiliency efforts and stuff like that. That's it's not quite there yet, but we're thinking about that.
Awesome. And by any chance, do we have a percentage or an idea of how many of these jobs are unionized employment versus just like apprenticeship model or using like employer curriculum or understanding for the workplace?
I mean, a lot of our focus for construction is on the trades, the unionized trades, and we have invested in pre-apprenticeship training that's union recognized, that we have been successful at connecting people to those jobs. If you're asking me like, what percentage of the portfolio of all the things I just said, it's probably a smaller percentage because the other industries are not so unionized, although nurses are also unionized. But you know what? I can come back to you probably with a more specific number. Sorry, trying to do that off the top of my head is maybe not the best way.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's always the union in any sector, so I'd be interested in hearing that number.
No, it's a great question.
And then, in terms of like looking at where we are with the pandemic and tourism, do you think, or would workforce development be open to establishing like a 7th partnership in the tourism industry, since it employs over 400,000 New Yorkers and generates upwards of $70 billion of economic activity each year?
absolutely open to looking at anything that works and would help for sure.
Great. The Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity launched a citywide data platform in 2017 to analyze workforce program services and outcome data from various city agencies, including yours. It appears that 5 city agencies, DPR, DYCD, HRA, NYCHA, and SBS, currently report data into that system. As I mentioned, according to the portal, over 55,000 people, over 450,000 have participated in a workforce development program at more than one of these agencies. Do you consider that a good number? And does this mean that work is being duplicated in at least 55,000 cases?
I'll be honest with you. You're I think a little more familiar with that data than I am. No, on the surface, it doesn't sound like a good number. I think that there is, and I think you said specifically, they're participating in workforce programs themselves. Because I can say that a lot of our customers receive public benefits, a good portion of them. So that there's definitely they're being served by multiple agencies for sure. But if you, so I honestly, I don't think have enough on the numbers to give you a better answer.
Okay, yeah, my concern around that is, having experience working in apprenticeship models and in workforce development in the past, more times than not, we have reoccurring folks. And I guess for me, it's about what does numbers around retention look like? How are these people just doing the same types of trainings over and over, not actually being able to be placed? So, finding that out for me would be great, just so we can start looking at our actual data. And I guess supplemental to that is, how many more programs and agencies do you expect to eventually input data into the system? Because that definitely correlates with how much overlap there is or repetitiveness of training or workshops.
For sure. My understanding of the vision is that all agencies over time will be part of the system, but I don't actually have the latest and greatest status on that. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you. Don't worry about apologizing. I just want to acknowledge my colleague, Councilmember Salamanca, has joined us into the hearing today. So just want to stick on interagency coordination. According to the Invest in Skills NYC Coalition, there are at least, as mentioned by co-chair Gail Brewer, at least 75 different workforce development programs in the city run by 21 different agencies. Who's ultimately responsible for overseeing the strategic direction of all of these programs?
I think it's a combination of the Mayor's Office for Workforce Development on the adult side and the Mayor's Office of Youth Employment, I think it's called, on the youth side.
Okay. And do we know what steps the administration is taking to ensure that the different agencies communicate, collaborate on workforce development issues? Or any trouble?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things in the blueprint that sort of point to increased coordination. I know Councilmember Brewer, you mentioned you don't like task force, but there's the Future of Workers Task Force, which is, the intention is to bring public and private partners together to sort of look at the end-to-end challenges that, meaning K through adult, find the gaps, figure out what needs to be done in the short term and the long term. And then there's a portal that will be established that will allow job seekers to get on, put their profile in, get their skills assessed, and then help them navigate to the right solution for them. It will also be available to, as I understand it, to employers so they can find talent. And so through those efforts, there'll be more, more coordination for sure.
And from your experience, have you seen whether, like in the past, or if there's an administrative plan to collaborate with partners at the state and federal levels to approach more coordination to our workforce development?
For sure. I mean, for example, we are on with the Department of Labor, I think every Friday, actually. And they are also, in many cases, co-located at our career center sites. And I want to say also, like, there's a lot of collaboration amongst us as well. Like we are working really closely with EDC to ensure that, we're using our strengths in the best way that we can and complementing theirs. And in every case, where possible, we try to source candidates from sister agencies like NYCHA and DYCD and HRA, so that we are making our training offerings available to everyone that needs them. So I hear you on the data, but there is more maybe more collaboration than is apparent.
Okay, great, thank you. And I want to acknowledge Councilmember Kevin Riley for joining us. Measuring success in workforce development and job training is how we get the best outcomes, right? From my experience, is how I was able to do lower costs per participant, really figuring out the hours to providing training for the highest retention and so on. Without adequate metrics and data analysis, it's difficult to systematically compare different workforce development programs and the success of the system as a whole. So under the de Blasio administration, Workforce Development and the Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity developed 13 common metrics for measuring the outcomes of workforce development programs. These metrics include standardized definitions of key terms like full-time job placement, part-time job placement, and academic enrollment. Could you please describe how the 13 measures were settled and which programs currently utilize those metrics?
So can I describe what you say, how they were what?
Can you describe how they were settled on the 13 measures? I
probably cannot, because as you said, it was an effort led by the Center for Economic Opportunity. I think I can tell you what I think the intent was. It was just as you said, to try to normalize the results from various programs and recognize that sometimes, like the ultimate thing is a person gets a job, right, and a good paying job. That's right. The ultimate success. But sometimes there are steps before that are also milestones. And I think that rather than make it like I did an industry informed training and I got a job, boom, it's done. They, I think, incorporated other milestones so that we could get a clearer picture of the path along by which somebody would need to travel in order to get to that end goal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that. It's clearly something I'll have to follow up with with the admin as well. So thank you for that.
But you know your workforce homework, I can tell.
I've worked in it for a while,
yes.
So I would like to think I know a little bit. Obviously, there's a lot more experts on this hearing. So I guess my follow-ups to that are there? Do you think there are any additional programs that should adopt the metrics going forward? And if you can make any comment to this, how do you see the administration's plan to utilize performance data to evaluate the different programs and inform workforce development investment strategies going forward?
I don't think I'd be able to comment on additional programs. I can say for SBS, I mean, we are pretty laser focused on the outcome is you get into the job you were trained for the job, and you earn the salary that we were aiming for. And I think we don't have any plans to move away from that. And I imagine that others do it the same way, others that, invest in the same kinds of investments. I think in terms of the workforce development strategies laid out in the blueprint, there may be different measures as you look at each individual thing. So I don't know, Faye, if you have anything you want to add to that in terms of your guys' approach.
I think everything you said made sense, Jackie, and thank you for the question, Chair Farias. I think the focus for this administration is really on getting good jobs in sustainably that offer benefits, that offer a pathway to growth, to in addition to getting a job that you have a future ahead of you. And that's something that we'll be looking at.
Great, thank you. And either one of you can comment if you'd like. What steps is the administration taking to ensure that the training programs available through workforce development system respond to the shifting needs of the labor market?
Maybe I'll start. I mean, again, we are going to leverage and expand our approach in terms of industry partnerships, and we'll continue to take our lead in terms of the demand that they are raising for us. And continue to do that. I don't know if you want to add anything.
I'd love to talk a little bit about our sector-driven approach to workforce, where we look at expanding in emerging sectors, in New York City, and sectors that offer a lot of job opportunity at a variety of levels. Two examples of that would include life sciences and offshore wind, where we're deeply invested in both industries. And one of the reasons why these industries are so attractive to us is that there are jobs for people who don't have college degrees, good jobs for people who don't have college degrees. And that is a really important piece as we think about who can access the opportunities. It's not enough to grow industries and to create jobs. The jobs have to be available to New Yorkers in all communities and at all levels. And both of those are examples of industries that will help power our equitable recovery by ensuring opportunity at all levels.
Thank you for that response. I'm just kind of staying on that. What are some tools that the EDC uses to determine which neighborhoods and populations should be prioritized when developing their workforce development programs?
So, it depends. We have assets at EDC that we operate on behalf of the city. So, to some extent, it's determined by those assets and where they are. But an example of how we're very much involving the community in a project is, again, I'm going to go back to offshore wind, which is $190 million investment in growing manufacturing and R&D and workforce out of the South, primarily out of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal and possibly other areas. And we have a $5 million commitment from Equinor, who is our leaseholder at South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, to make sure that the job growth, the opportunities are equitably distributed to the surrounding neighborhood, to environmental justice communities, and a real focus on MWBEs. And so that's one example of that. We also have a program where I think this is across the city called Hire NYC, which requires developers to make sure that they tap local talent streams, and we provide resources to help them do so. This is a partnership with SBS and other agencies to make sure that folks in surrounding communities participate in all of the economic opportunities associated with our projects.
That's great. And in terms of like equity or like equitably distributed resources for workforce development or job training, what does planning look like in terms of that? Whenever I think of a program, I think of a new development coming or a new initiative, a lot of times, at least for communities like mine, I would need a long lead up to make sure there's local hire, to make sure that people have the right training and credentials to go into those jobs or to go into those fields. So what does that look like for the EDC in utilizing their assets and developing these initiatives and rollouts?
I know I'm going to be talking a lot about offshore wind, but I feel like it's a really great example of the way that we center equity in our work. And so we are currently developing those partnerships with Workforce One, CUNY, SUNY, UPROS, the Department of Education, the New York City Harbor School, organizations like Opportunities for Better Tomorrow, Non-Traditional Employment for Women, Pathways to Apprenticeship, and others. I was on a workforce gathering with folks across academia and business and industry and nonprofit CBOs to try to figure out what exactly the workforce, what are the levers and the tools, who needs to be at the table to figure out how to make our workforce opportunities at in the offshore wind project as equitable as possible. One of our co-chairs of our advisory council in offshore wind is Elizabeth Yimpierre, who leads UPROS, a community organization in Sunset Park. And we are just in constant conversation with our community to make sure that when these jobs become available, that the community will be ready.
Great, thank you for that response. I have a couple more questions and then I'll yield my time to my co-chair. Just the last thing for EDC, what role will EDC play in implementing the vision laid out by the mayor's blueprint, if any?
So that's a great question. And as you know, the blueprint was just released. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be huddling with our deputy mayor and her team, and I'm sure SBS and other agencies, in figuring out exactly where we are going to be plugging in. But I can tell you for sure that business development, business attraction, that's a key priority for EDC. We're really expanding our business development efforts to make sure that not only do we keep companies that are here and growing, but also that we attract new ones. Jackie talked about how since 2021, we've been able to retain 3,700 jobs in New York City. And that is just going to continue deepening and growing. So offshore wind is really part of green economy, right? A broader opportunity around green technologies, which would focus on, to some extent, on building retrofits, building decarbonization. There's a whole workforce effort there to make sure that, you know, as New York City buildings reach climate goals and decarbonization goals, that there's a workforce able to provide those services and trained. We are continuing to engage with the Small Business Resource Network, which was a partnership with a partnership for New York City, the 5 chambers of commerce, the Peterson Foundation, and EDC, which has helped 28,000 small businesses with a variety of recovery resources, including digital transformation. And we'll continue our work around offshore, around life sciences, and other areas that we're already active in.
Great, thank you. And my last 2 questions are more participant focused. My first one is around stipends for low-income program participants. According to the blueprint, the administration plans to expand stipends to low-income New Yorkers participating in certain workforce development programs. What are the eligibility criteria for these stipends under the existing program? How large are the stipends currently? What exactly does the admin plan to expand the stipend program? And then what kind of stipends are there? Are they financial, childcare, housing, etc.?
Thank you for the question. This is one of my personal favorite parts of the blueprint, just for the record. The current pilot that we're doing is a pilot with about, I want to say 300 or 400 participants. And we're doing like a random control trial because we have been trying to prove that stipends will result in more people connecting to jobs at the end. And as you know, like maybe you don't know because I didn't say it, but I'll say it now. We have found that many of our successful trainings are immersive, and so a lot of people aren't able to participate because they have to work, or they have other responsibilities and whatnot. So allowing them and providing them with a stipend removes that barrier, and so we're very excited to see that we're going to be able to expand that. The current stipends are, I want to say, and we'll get back to you with an exact, but I feel like they're $300 or $400 a week. It's cash that is provided. In addition, most of our programs include transportation and some food as well, depending on the program. And so the plan for expansion at this point is to expand, but we still have some work to do in terms of working out the details and whatnot. But it's from my perspective, really an exciting initiative.
Great, thank you. I mean, with an unsolicited recommendation from what I found working in workforce, if we're gonna answer for the lack of women and lack of representation of women in a lot of these fields, especially like construction or any of the other sectors, childcare,
100%.
monetary stipends is really important. So for an unsolicited recommendation.
No, I appreciate that. And if both of those things are part of the plan, expanding access to childcare and financial stipends. So we are excited.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
One of the proposals in the blueprint is to expand investments in bridge programs, such as apprenticeship programs, high school equivalency programs, and English programs for speakers of other languages. How much does the city currently spend on these kind of programs, and what additional resources does the administration plan to provide to these kinds of programs going forward?
I do not have the number citywide for you. I could, and I don't even think I have it for us. We have at one time or another run about 7 to 9 what people characterize as bridge programs. I can definitely get back to you with our investments. And in terms of expanding, where it's about meeting people where they are, right? So for all the things that you just said, like I sort of like to think of it not as a bridge and more as like a longer program that meets people where they are and integrates things like contextualized English, numeracy, where that makes sense, all the things. And so we're working through the budgeting process and with OMB and City Hall, but we're pretty confident that we're going to be able to do big, great things here. We're also very excited about this.
Great, thank you so much for your response.
My pleasure.
I'll yield my time now and hand it over to my co-chair, Councilmember Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. I have a few overall questions, because if we're going to focus on the blueprint, as we're calling it, just to say about the task forces, because I think it's good to have the future of workers, but you've got one on commercial corridors, you've got one on public realm, you've got one on industry, you've got one on small business, which I think already exists. You've got one on street vendors, which I think already exists. You've got a green economy one. And then you have a tech one, which might already exist under Matt Fraser, I don't know. And there's probably others that I missed. Then there's one on inefficiency in agencies. Those are all the task forces in the blueprint. That's too many. So my question is, if it's gonna just focus on the future of workers, that what might make some sense. But I understand you're saying that in the future, between EDC and SBS, you're gonna sit down and figure it all out. But you also have a couple of mayors, deputy mayors, who one has youth. I think Sheena Wright has youth. I don't know, I assume that it is Maria Torres Springer who has the other workforce, because that's her background. Even that is a little bit dysfunctional. So I guess I want to know a little bit more from your point of view. How do you plan to reimagine the system? You cannot have 21 agencies doing this. And you cannot have it as easy as you might. I work with Ulysses all the time at 125th Street. I love Ulysses in terms of workforce one. But the issue is it doesn't necessarily include what CUNY needs to be doing, or what the CTEs at DOE need a whole lot of help. I think that what EDC does with life sciences, I know that program well, is great, but you need to do it with all the other kinds of programs, because you cannot just tell somebody to go get a job in healthcare. They need tender, loving care, for lack of a better word. They need stipends. They need a whole series of wraparound support services that, to be honest with you, if you don't have something like what EDC is doing with life sciences, where you are getting people into those jobs who wouldn't normally be in those jobs, who knows who all these, smaller agencies are that are doing life sciences. There's only 10 people in the company. So how are you going to know, coming out of CUNY, that this wonderful company is in a community that you can join? Well, you get the point. How are you going to, between the two of you, Jackie and Faye, going to push to get with Joey, with the deputy mayors, to make it a real workforce system that is reimagined? I have what de Blasio did. I mean, it's pathetic. Just as an example, in terms of his report, I knew that report. And, there were, even in life sciences, not that many people got the job. In Future Works, whatever the hell that is, nobody got a job. In Blockchain Center, nobody got a job. In CUNY Tech, nobody got a job. So that was a report a while ago. So how are we going to do things differently? I'd love to hear it. Thank you very much. Just to start.
You are very welcome, and thank you for the question. As I said, a couple of things. SBS and EDC do work very collaboratively, and as for an example, have done so and will do so moving forward as well. We both invest in tech training as an example, right? But our investments are distinct. And we did that purposefully because we didn't want to duplicate. We wanted to leverage each other's strengths and whatnot. So our investments are all around web development and data analysis and so forth. EDC is focused on cyber. So we will continue to do that. You asked the question, what will we do? In addition, as I said, I think the vision is the task force are a way of getting input, right? And that's a good thing. And so the future of workers task force is, as I understand it, is intended to bring the public-private shareholders together and uncover what is needed in the short term, what is needed in the long term, and come out with a K to adult plan on how to organize things. And as I said earlier, in addition, a portal for New Yorkers, the talent portal to come on, put your profile in, get your skills in there, get assessed, will help more coordination because it'll put you on a path to what is a good match for you, and will also be open to employers. I don't know if you want to add anything, Faye?
As Jackie said, we will work together, and we'll continue to do so. And I also just want to emphasize the value of talking to industry, to understand how to, I know you don't love the task force, Chair Brewer, but it is really important when we talk about training people for any number of roles, making sure that industry is at the table to make sure we fully understand their needs, so that when we talk about tech training or any other type of training, that people are being trained in very specific ways that enable them to get a job in these growing sectors where there's a lot of opportunity.
I mean, like what you do in life sciences, are you planning to do something similar where people do get, if needed, stipends, where people do get support? Are you going to do that at EDC with other industries where you need to bring in students like from CUNY? Is that something that you're planning?
We'll evaluate that idea for other industries. Our new president just started last week, and we are having all kinds of updates and briefings, and that's an idea that we will be surfacing as we sharpen our plans going forward.
Yeah, but just to be clear, I mean, we do that in most of our programs today at SBS.
No, but you're two agencies out of the 21, in case you know the same. So we're trying to look at this as a more systemic. I understand that's Joey's problem and somebody else's problem, and it's not yours, but you guys have been around for a while. And I know sometimes people are afraid to make suggestions and be bold, but we are trying to be bold. And because I do think as hard as you work, there's just, you'll hear from the many people who are testifying today, there just needs to be a bolder response to the getting us back, but also to do it differently, to not be the same. And obviously I'm a big CUNY supporter. So do you have any suggestions? Like, I know you may not work with CUNY. I don't know if you work with CUNY.
No, we work a lot with CUNY.
All right, but the seven community colleges, they need to get funding to be able to have they can't get any kind of support now, maybe from the state's budget. But right now, if you're taking a course to get a certification, you're not matriculating, you get no money. You got to pay for it yourself. And that is the plumber, the electrician, the healthcare worker, and so on. So what are you thinking about that? Why hasn't that happened in the past? Is that something? CUNY is the jewel to make workforce possible in the city of New York. So what are you doing with CUNY? I
100% agree with you. The majority of our investments in training are with CUNY. I think I don't know if you heard me a little bit earlier.
I heard you.
On CUNY 2X, it was a $20 million investment involved 7 colleges, aiming at doubling the number of computer science students into tech jobs.
I got it. That's different than the certifications, which is what I'm talking about, though.
Well, yeah, that's one part of it. The other, like I said, all of separate and distinct. We work with many community colleges to do trainings in healthcare, in transportation, in food service. Like it's the majority partner. Multiple schools.
Okay, we're going to differ on that one. I want the one that I just described. You could do yours, but you got to think bigger. You got to think about, there's just so many folks out there, and we need plumbers, electricians, technology, and so on. We need these people, and nobody in the city is saying, this is how we're going to get there. You guys are doing great, but you're not thinking big enough. Maybe that's not your job. I got it. But
Well,
problem. It's a big problem.
I don't think I understand your question. I'm sorry.
Okay, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need people in addition to the suggestions that you have made. When they go to CUNY, you have to pay to get that certification. You cannot get any kind of government unless the state perhaps comes up with it. Kathy Hochul has suggested it. So every single one of the 7 community colleges would like that kind of funding so that they could pay for the students tuition to go to certification classes. These are not matriculated. So that's what
I
they're
understand.
asking.
Continue it. I got you.
Okay, but that has to happen. That has to be part of your task force.
Okay.
That would make a huge difference in people getting jobs.
I hear you. Okay.
Okay.
Look forward to working on that.
I don't think you need a lot of task force discussion, because between Joey and the groups, this is all laid out. It just needs funding, and it does need coordination. That's what I think we're trying to say. And the other thing is, we talked a little bit about the talent portal. I was just wondering if you have some suggestions as to how it actually could be used. Would somebody be able to go to SBS, EDC, CUNY, DOE, CT, and so on, and be able to access it? Is that the concept? 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Virginia does that. So I'm just wondering, how would it look to you?
As I understand it, as a job seeker, you would get your profile set up in there. You would get your skills assessed, and then the system itself would help you navigate to, based on your skills, your interests, whatever your next thing would be, a training, direct connect to a job, whatever the case may be.
All right.
That's how I understand it.
And you could go through a nonprofit as well as a city agency. You could do it anywhere.
That's how I understand it.
Okay. And do you know how long it would take or how much it would cost to build it?
I do not.
Okay. Could somebody get back to us with that information?
For sure.
Okay. And then the issue of stipends, and we talked about that earlier. That's an excellent idea.
Love it.
Would it be across, you've got childcare, you've got housing, you've got different kinds of stipends, because without all of the above, we're not going to be able to work, as we know, and women out of the task force, out of the workplace more than generally. So what's the list? I know that you have some that you mentioned that you already talking about in terms of the bridge programs. Example, I believe in the last couple of months, the ELL classes are 200 or 400% of capacity, just to give you an example. So just give us an example of some of the bridge programs that you think should be funded, just to, and should they be 24 hours a day for childcare, et cetera? What's your big goal and dream for bridge programs?
From my perspective, I think I said this earlier, I think of a not so much a bridge program as much as a longer training that meets somebody where they are. And so, for example, we do a foreign-born nursing training so that they can get to the NCLEX. And so embedded in that is contextualized English so that they can, folks who are further away, who in the past couldn't succeed and couldn't get into the training, we've included that. In our tech training, we recently launched Future Code, which it's modeled after a traditional boot camp, but it's a longer training because it accommodates people who haven't had the exposure to tech or haven't had any practical experience, which is required oftentimes to get into a boot camp, et cetera, et cetera. We've done bridges or again, elongated trainings that include bridge components and bilingual medical assistance. So to me, any training that we have developed with industry that we know is reflective of an in-demand job and is successful at connecting people to those better careers. Once we've figured out how to do that, we better like add in a bridge, what people call a bridge, but like move it back and make sure it accommodates people who are all but for a few fundamental things. It could represent a path to them. I hope that makes sense.
It does. I mean, it's another deputy mayor. So it's back to my problem of he's got to figure out this coordination. Maybe that's what your task force is going to do. We'll
Yep.
see. Right. In terms of people with disabilities, that's I guess this is mostly for EDC. What steps has EDC taken, if any, to help the city's workforce development agencies better prepare individuals with disabilities for tech jobs? Because it's a natural to have just people with disabilities work in technology. And then also, I believe that the federal government has a 7% goal, if not mandated, and I don't know if it is mandated, for persons with disabilities to get jobs with city contractors and subcontractors. I don't think the city is there, or I don't even know if we have a goal. So if you could talk about people with individuals with disabilities and their.
Or you accidentally were muted for your last part.
I'm asking EDC.
So thank you, Chair, for, this is a great question. We agree that training for those with disabilities is key. And we are going to get back to you to discuss any disability focused programs at EDC.
Okay. And even how they work in the city workforce. All right, and then my last question, because I know people want to talk, I could go on much too long. The city of New York has a big workforce. I don't know if it comes under DCAS, it comes under other agencies, but I have not heard of an agency that doesn't need staff, all kinds of staff. So what are we doing? I don't know if it's an SBS, I don't know if it's an EDC. What are we doing as a city to recruit for these positions? And of course, we're in this, you know, the agency's heads are told, I don't want to work full time. It's hard. This pandemic has created havoc. And then of course, the private sector says, oh, you can work part time, no problem. And so you're caught in between. I got it, because I hear about it all day long. I hear from your commissioners and I hear from outside, because I hear everything. So now my question is, just generally though, how are we recruiting for city agencies sometimes having specialized needs? Who's in charge of that and who's doing it?
I think it's a combination of the individual agencies and DCAS as well.
Because it's not working. That's why I'm concerned.
It's a hard market. You are right, but it's getting better.
From your mouth to God's ears, because I can tell you right now, I get complaints from commissioners who are not able to recruit. So I'm just saying we need to do better. And again, maybe it's different kinds of offerings, it's lots of situations, but as we're out there recruiting people for different positions, we have to not forget about the city of New York. All right, I'll stop there. And now I guess we go back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Brewer. I'm going to turn it back to Chair Farias for additional questions.
Sorry, once we have a lot of back and forth, more questions come to the brains. Thank you, Chair Brewer. Just a couple of follow-ups for some of the items that she asked. How are we utilizing our career and technical education schools, the data that we're collecting and the dearth of employment that we're seeing citywide to continue programs for job training? And this initially came up when you were discussing your partnership or the way you work with CUNY and the different types of either apprenticeship models or vocational training that they have in each of those institutions.
I can only speak to a portion of your questions as it relates to SBS. And you said CTE specifically, yeah?
Yeah.
So we have, through our healthcare industry partnership, in the past few years, there's some kind of a weird echo. I'm sorry, I hope you can hear me. It's good, okay. Developed a work-based learning model, a new model with the CTE schools for people on a CNA track in healthcare. And in addition, the District 79, which is not CTE, school has a partnership with us. They're on site in our West Farm Center. You're nodding. Hopefully you're familiar with that because it's not so far from you. Where we're working with people who want to connect to high school equivalency and integrating job training where possible and so forth. So as for the broader plan, I don't have the answer to you for that. Sorry.
Okay.
We can get back to you.
Sure, thank you. And then are we evaluating like community-based organization metrics or like our programmatic metrics that are met, like cost per participant, to see where we're having the best use of funding, like best practices, or what needs to be replicated, or maybe even what needs to no longer be funded?
Right. I think that is part of the plan. We certainly do that on, for our programs. I think ADC does the same. And I imagine that is something that's done across the city through the central offices.
You'd be surprised. And then lastly, I just thought of a data demographic collection question. How are we evaluating like some of this demographic numbers that we're collecting, like sex, gender, like all of those things, and prioritizing the evaluation of budgetary and training dollars towards filling some of those gaps and demographic goals that we have citywide?
I think you mean, let me see if I'm not totally clear on your question. Are you saying, how are we ensuring that we're getting to everyone that needs our help? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or evaluating like this industry needed X amount of, BIPOC community members. In the 3 years, we have data showing that we filled those gaps and are now exceeding. Do we then backtrack, or do we stabilize, or do we keep investing in it?
To the degree that I can answer for SBS, I will share with you that like there are certain industries where there's not enough representation from the BIPOC community. For example, it's a fantastic industry. It's really good in terms of wages and career trajectory and so forth. And so a lot of our efforts have been on and the industry, I think, might be among the first to say that they're sort of hungry for more diversity. And so a lot of our training investments have evolved so that I mentioned this program Future Code, which is aiming at increasing the number of Black and Latinx web developers. So where we can, and I think you are pretty familiar with construction and the tracking of that industry and all the efforts over the years, and that continues and so forth. And so where we see an industry that needs more diversity, we are making efforts and tailoring those investments so that we are successful in connecting people into those kinds of jobs. I hope that makes sense and answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to get a better sense of, not only for BIPOC community members, but also LGBTQ plus,
for sure,
persons with disabilities, so on and so forth. Like just trying to gauge how we are actually being more reflective and proactive than reactive. And I'm done, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It seems like Chair Brewer has additional questions.
It's just the issue of technology. And again, another agency to add to it is Do It, of course. One of the concerns, of course, is just broadband and access, low cost quality. So when you're thinking about the students you're working with or the programs you're working with, who comes in to think about how they can make sure that they can access the portal? Are the libraries open? How do you use the technology that's available so that it's affordable to you and fast enough? Who's thinking about that? Is that what Matt Fraser is going to be doing? Was it ever part of your past? How does the whole tech world play a role? Obviously, it is what makes jobs possible, not only the jobs themselves and the training that goes into it, but the access. Who's thinking about the expansion of broadband and accessibility?
Do It, Matt Fraser, that's right.
He has to think about that, but in the past, it never came up.
No, absolutely it did. And it has been on our minds. And then I could give you an example, like at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot, like everybody, all the folks had to pivot and there was not enough laptops for people in our programs. And so we worked together with private industry and were able to get some and deliver them and fill the gaps there. So we're thinking about it all the time and working with all kinds of partners to bridge those gaps.
Okay. One other question for EDC. Just, I know that you do work hard to try to find companies that will work with young people and work with people who need jobs who might normally think about that as a career. But you have to work with those companies. They're not necessarily going to take somebody whom they are not just, that they don't see as a perfect fit. So in the future, how are you going to be more expansive? I think the only way to do it is to have programs like what you do with life sciences, because you can get, 10 people to sign up for Google and they need, 15,000 people, but you still want to get people from CUNY. You want to get people from your CTE programs. You want to get people who aren't normally applying for those jobs. So what kind of different outreach are you going to do to talk to these companies about taking, not everybody's Jamie Dimon who wants to do something different with Barbara Chang. That's a different world. But for those that don't necessarily support this kind of expansion, what kind of big program is EDC going to do to reach out to those companies? Because it's retail work. It's 1-1-1.
Absolutely right about that. And it is, a hand-to-hand situation, and it requires deep relationships with industry and deep relationships with individual companies, and also on the other side with educational providers. And I'm just going to go back to offshore because it really is, as we've really deepened our thinking about equity, this is an example of the way we will work now and going forward. I want to talk a bit, if I could, about our partnerships with CUNY Central at Kingsborough Community College. There is $10 million for capital costs across the CUNY system to train folks for the offshore wind industry, and nearly $500,000 specifically for offshore specific training programs at Kingsborough Community College. And this will train roughly 150 people in roles like the crew transfer vessel training. This is an example of an industry where we have everybody at the table. So it's a lot easier to make those calls and to bridge those conversations when industry was in on the ground floor and the community was in on the ground floor. Everybody's in together. And, as we look toward other areas like the green economy, where there's a shared vision, that's going to be another opportunity. A broader green economy to create closer relationships at the outset. So those sort of one-to-one conversations are just naturally built in.
Okay, so like every single HVAC company you should be in touch with, as an example. All right, thank you very much. All yours.
Thank you, Chair Brewer. If any additional members have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no hands raised, we will now move on to the public portion of the hearing. Thank you to members of the administration for your testimony. And now we will move on to our first three panelists from the public. Will be Annie Garneva, followed by Justin Collins, and then James Parrott. Ms. Garneva, you may begin when the sergeants announce the timer.
Time starts now.
Can the host please unmute Annie Garneva?
Annie's very, very cool. Let's see.
Seems Annie may be, oh, there she is. Okay.
Apologies. Was trying to coordinate all of our members on the back end, so just give me 1 second. You were having technical difficulties, and now I'm having technical difficulties.
Whatever you say, Annie's going to be fabulous, so just go ahead.
I know, I apologize. We put a lot of stock into this hearing, so I just want to make sure that
we appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you. So good morning to everyone. Thank you, Chairs Farias and Brewer, for this opportunity to testify before you. My name is Annie Garneva, and I'm the interim CEO for the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. Founded in 1997, we are the largest city-based workforce development association in the country with over 200 members, providing jobs for over 600,000 New Yorkers, many of whom you'll hear from today. Our members create jobs and connect underserved people, such as New Yorkers of color, New Yorkers with multiple barriers to employment, and low or moderate incomes, as well as hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers across the city. Our coalition prioritizes supporting job seekers who have been left out of the economic recovery due to systemic and historic marginalization, and connecting them to opportunities so they can support their families and help their communities thrive. As many of you know, the economy has been undergoing rapid and dramatic changes bolstered by automation and the pandemic's push toward a digital landscape. requiring workers to remain lifelong learners and design their own career pathways, thus making traditional ways of training and education obsolete. Today's labor market demands that workers constantly upgrade their skills and learn new ones in order to remain competitive. Unfortunately, the current underfunded and siloed workforce system that we've talked about today, which is made up of hundreds of programs and organizations across 21 agencies and financed through a disjointed combination of public and private funders, is woefully inadequate in supporting the growing demand and complexity of training, upskilling, and finding employment for millions of New Yorkers, as well as workers and business owners. Workforce service providers and advocates have done a Herculean job of supporting New Yorkers, especially in the face of increased need over the last 2 years, and have been willing and eager to collaborate with the city for years. Unfortunately, we previously have not seen the action and new investments that we feel are necessary to make progress for New Yorkers, particularly around the de Blasio administration's career pathways and New York Works economic and workforce development strategies.
I'm expired.
Oof.
Keep going a little bit more, Annie. Just go ahead a little bit more.
Thank you so much. We commend the Adams administration for laying out a vision for a long-term approach that invests in people and breaks down barriers. We also commend and thank the administration for making workforce development a key pillar of the economic recovery, which is new for kind of mayoral economic plans. So definitely want to highlight that as a great step forward, as well as for integrating active equity and community-centric plans. However, as I've spoken about, the workforce ecosystem is highly underfunded and persistently has employment barriers, especially for low access communities. For this reason, that I won't go into the variety of background. I'll kind of cover the 3 main recommendations that we have for the system, and you'll hear from our members about how they've been how they would scale up those new investments. So first of all, we urge the city to build, apologies, running around. First of all, we urge the city to immediately invest in recovery through a $250 million reemployment program. This would include wage subsidies and training aligned to in-demand sectors that have either been stable or growing, as well as making sure that wage subsidies are available to small businesses and New Yorkers in order to maintain new jobs. The city should specifically target, of course, low-income communities of color. Second, we hope that the city will invest $100 million and baseline that annually, and that's new money, not old money, into specifically growing out talent development programming, especially $20 million for bridge and pre-apprenticeship programs, to make sure that training programs are accessible and don't really leave out people with low literacy and numeracy rates. That $100 million in new funding should go for flexible funding streams to create new programs and kind of ensure that collaboration and partnership happens within programs, which current contracts make that very difficult. And lastly, since we've spoken so much about investments during today's hearing, we hope that a new permanent workforce development fund is created so that we can have sources of money coming in from the economic development side, as well as to get more buy-in from the employer community, whether that's through a new tax levy or some kind of new financial commitment from employers looking to participate in the workforce system and really create new pots of funding, since, as we've seen, it's just completely underfunded at the moment. So thank you to the city for a blueprint that's really exciting for everybody and a new vision. Thank you for council pushing that forward. And we really hope to see now implementation plans, timelines, and really numbers and financial commitments. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Garneva. If any of the members have a question for the panelists, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Or of course, if either chair has a question, feel free to ask it now. Okay.
Yeah, she did it.
Seeing no hands raised, we're going to move on to the next panelist. Next, we will hear from Justin Collins, followed by James Parrott, and then Marco Damiani. Mr. Collins, you may begin when the sergeants call the timer.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Justin Collins, and I represent Workforce Professionals Training Institute, WPTI. We increase the effectiveness of people, programs, and organizations that are committed to generating pathways out of poverty through employment. Our three-tiered approach strengthens capacity at all levels of the workforce development system, incorporating professional training and skill building for individual workforce professionals, capacity building for programs and organizations that provide job training, placement, and wraparound services, and systems building to create linkages, foster research, and influence funding and best practice priorities. We serve 80% of New York City CBOs providing workforce services and their staff, a community that's overwhelmingly made up of women, people of color, and disproportionately women of color. I just want to say we echo the coalition's ask for $250 million for reemployment programs, which are going to play a critical role in the city's recovery in terms of connecting displaced workers to reemployment. We also support an investment of $100 million in workforce training programs annually, including $20 million for bridge and apprenticeship programming, $15 million to support development and scaling of new programming and required digital infrastructure, and the development of a workforce fund. And we want to ensure that workforce providers are at the table at every step of the way regarding decisions being made regarding the city's economic recovery. I want to emphasize a few key areas where we believe the city must place its focus, its investment, and its efforts. And those include capacity building, digital transformation of workforce development, and then also support of the Just Pay campaign to ensure fair wages for human services professionals. Most notably, as the city emerges into a changed economy where workers need to be prepared for an increasingly digital labor market, we need real investment in digital infrastructure for workforce development and also upskilling and training and capacity building for workforce professionals and organizations so they can effectively harness and use this technology to support the job seekers that they work with. As the city emerges from an economic... Thank you very much. I will also be submitting in writing.
Justin, what do you mean by digital infrastructure? What is that? I mean, I know what I think it is, but what is it to you?
Absolutely. So right now, since the pandemic began, we've been delivering services remotely by and large. But it's not just being able to serve clients remotely. It's things like digital data infrastructure, so people can collect, analyze, and share intake and outcomes data and engage in data-driven employer engagement. It requires things like learning management systems and CRM systems, which will allow people to reach their job seekers and track their job seekers and really reach clients virtually at any time from any device anywhere through both synchronous live virtual training, but also asynchronous training, which is going to be increasingly important for folks with busy schedules, childcare needs, et cetera. And workforce professionals really need the skills to effectively utilize that software if they want to make the most of it. Because right now, we're emerging in a complicated and increasingly digital world. And not only do the job seekers need to develop the skills to advance in that world, but the people who serve them need to develop those skills as well.
All right, I got it. Thank you. That may be part of an expanded portal in many different ways. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll next hear from the next group of panelists. Next up is James Parrott, followed by Marco Damiani, and then Teresa Macchio. Mr. Parrott, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
It appears that James Parrott's having some technical difficulties. Can we try again to unmute him? Okay. All right. Well, we will move on to the next panelist and circle back to James Parrott in a few minutes once we sort out his tech issue. Let's hear next from Marco Damiani, followed by Teresa Macchio, and then Betty Ann Tomasar. Marco Damiani, you can begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now. Marco, you're still on mute.
Okay, good now?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Marco Damiani, CEO of HRC New York City and member of the New York City Employment Training Coalition Inaugural Policy Council. HRC is the largest nonprofit in New York State providing services and supports of people with developmental disabilities and their families employing nearly 5,000 people throughout the city. We partner with corporations such as Salesforce, Etsy, and RXR, and government entities such as the MTA, DYCD, New York City DSS, and the Mayor's Office of People with Disabilities, and have helped thousands of people with disability become gainfully employed. We have significant DYCD contracts. There have been countless challenges and pain points faced during the pandemic, funding across 21 agencies, lack of flexibility, difficulty with data and metrics, and underfunding. The workforce ecosystem has been woefully underfunded and undersupported for decades. This especially impacts those from communities that have been historically marginalized and disinvested, in particular, in our case, people with disabilities. We've all faced difficulty in delivering services due to new digital infrastructure and curriculum needs. We need to upgrade and build new programs reflective of those sectors that are strong in the COVID economy. We really want to see that $250 million for COVID reemployment programs become an essential investment to ensure progress in vital workforce initiatives. I also want to share that for the past 3.5 years, AHRC New York City has an incredibly successful public-private partnership with New York City DSS, piloting an inclusive internship program. Funded through a foundation, we've now placed over 100 interns with a wide range of disabilities and placements throughout HRA and Department of Homeless Services. Of those people, 30 are now employed, 17 in city government. This model works. We have a manual prepared to guide other city agencies in accomplishing this goal. This program is powerful proof of concept that's readily replicable and scalable throughout New York City. This is the kind of creative partnership we believe is great for government, good for people with disabilities. We really encourage the council to work with our community to expand initiatives like this one. So thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Damiani. If any council members have questions, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no additional questions, we will now move on to the next panelist. Next, we'll hear from Teresa Macchio, followed by Betty Ann Tamasiar, and then Eli Dworkin. Teresa Macchio, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Macchio, Director of Partnerships for the American Management Association. The AMA is a nearly 100-year-old nonprofit global leader in talent development based in New York City.
Excuse me, Teresa?
Yes.
Your audio is coming in very choppy. You might want to try adjusting your microphone.
My speaker is 100%. I'm sorry, nothing. Is that any better?
Still a little bit choppy.
It could be my firewall. I apologize. COVID has caused major disruption in the workforce, and companies needed to be agile as they struggled with staff recruitment and retention, training and employee engagement, and most importantly, servicing their customers. AMA would like to be part of New York City's workforce development and recovery, but currently members work in silos and there's no one system with accountability and tracking. For example, workers who complete career courses in IT and healthcare would benefit greatly from AMA's soft skills to round out their competencies and provide management, communication, project management, and leadership skills, but we are not connected in a system. AMA receives no funding from New York City. Our courses are typically paid for by the employer or they are self-funded. NYCETC's proposed $250 million budget for reemployment could be used for reskilling and upskilling new and existing employees. Since March of 2020, AMA pivoted to remote training and provided impactful professional development for more than 1,500 New Yorkers and more than 25,000 employees across the country. In the last decade alone, AMA has trained 10 million people to do their jobs better and align with company goals. AMA supports NYCETC's recommendation of a $250 million COVID reemployment program with subsidized employment and employer engagement. These funds will help employers pay for AMA's 160 plus courses in managerial skills, women's leadership, communication, project management, finance, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and critical thinking to motivate and direct reports and teams. These crucial skills are both necessary and transferable across all sectors in the mayor's plan for recovery: tech, life sciences and healthcare, industrial and manufacturing, creative and cultural, and jobs for the future.
Thank you, Ms. Macchio. Any of the council members have any questions for this panelist? Please use the Zoom raise hand function now. Seeing no hands raised, we will move on to the next panelist. Next, we will hear from Betty Ann Tamasiar, followed by Eli Dvorkin, and then Katie Gall-Stiggy. Betty Ann Tamasiar, you may begin when the sergeants announce the timer.
Time starts now.
Thank you, committee chairs and members. Chairs Farias and Brewer. Eileen Torres, the Bronx Works Executive Director, extends her regards. My name is Betty Ann Mesa, and I am the Director of Workforce Development at Bronx Works. Throughout the pandemic, Bronx Works has pivoted to meet the employment and wraparound service needs of Bronx residents. In 2021, our Workforce Development Department engaged over 10,000 persons, providing them with employment and support services inclusive of job readiness, occupational skills training, job placement, and free tax prep services and one-on-one financial counseling services. Our city funders currently include HRA, DYCD, HPD, and the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. During the first wave of the pandemic, Bronx Works focused on providing emergency aid to those who lost their jobs during the pandemic. We have subsequently refocused our employment services to provide intensive short-term training to Bronx residents who seek high-demand, well-paying jobs. We continue to collaborate with Bronx-based and citywide employers in several sectors to meet their demands for highly skilled and highly motivated employees. Bronx Works is encouraged that Mayor Adams has created an economic blueprint to help our city and its 5 boroughs move forward as we strive to rebound from COVID. We appreciated his decision to marry workforce development and economic development activities. This marriage should yield positive results for job seekers and job hiring institutions alike. Bronx Works supports the effort of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition to put some dollars to the mayor's plan. We support the coalition's proposals to add substance to the plan by establishing a $250 million COVID reemployment plan and providing at least $100 million to support innovative training efforts. We also support the coalition's proposals for investments in wraparound services that will ensure high rates of labor force participation in employment. These wraparound investments will help support a stable, productive, and healthy physically and mentally workforce efforts.
Time expired.
I have a question quickly. So you're a great program. What if, setting aside what you and Annie have come up with, which is important, what is it that would help? Obviously money, but what exactly should that money be used for your amazing staff? Is it technology? Is it skill building for the residents? What is it that would really turn the tide in terms of getting people employed for long-term sustainable jobs?
Well, obviously, I think adult education and of course stipends, right? So we need to get people from point A to point Z. And if we look at past plans, there's really no plan to do that. So we have to figure out how do we get individuals, educated and skilled up so that they can assume all these great opportunities everyone talks about. And that has been a huge challenge for us. So adult basic education is definitely one. And then stipends, as people come into job training programs and things like that, they still have families to support. They still have children to feed. They still have to pay their rent. So they need, that stipend will kind of help to help them financially as they try to get themselves on the road to self-sufficiency.
Okay. And do you work with some of the community colleges in the Bronx, the great community colleges?
Well, we have partnered in the past with Hostos and Bronx community colleges on different initiatives related to training and adult education.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will next move on to the following group of panelists. Next, we will hear from Eli Dvorkin, followed by Katie Gall-Stiggy, and then Carlin Cowan. Eli Dvorkin, you can begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Eli Dvorkin, and I'm the Editorial and Policy Director at the Center for an Urban Future, an independent research organization focused on building a more equitable economy in New York City. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify today. I'd like to focus my brief remarks on 4 key steps that city government should take to make the city's workforce development system stronger and more effective. First, city leaders should focus on scaling up the city's most effective workforce programs. New York's exemplary nonprofit career training organizations serve no more than a few dozen to a few hundred New Yorkers each year. As part of a larger reemployment program, the city should launch a $100 million competitive grant program designed to enable effective organizations to partner, scale, and build accessibility into their programs, ensuring that far more New Yorkers can gain access to what's already working. Second, expand support for bridge models, which provide crucial on-ramps into effective training. Too many New Yorkers struggle to gain entry to the best-in-class job training programs out there due to gaps in literacy, math skills, and digital fluency. New bridge programs can open doors to effective career training, and create connections among organizations where few exist today. Third, spark hundreds more apprenticeship programs, especially in high-wage fields that are insufficiently diverse, such as technology, finance, advertising, and the green economy. Apprenticeships are a proven model for launching individuals without a college credential into family-sustaining careers, but the city is home to just a handful outside the building trades and has made too little progress in recent years. The city should partner with CUNY, training providers and industry, to launch at least 100 new apprenticeship pathways in growing fields and commit to training 5,000 residents annually through apprenticeships by 2025, while drawing on the underutilized Empire State Apprenticeship Tax Credit to help fund this training. And fourth, integrate workforce development into future rezonings. To date, very few workforce investments have resulted from rezonings. The council should integrate investments in local hiring and training networks into rezonings from the very start, ensuring that the infrastructure exists to help local residents benefit economically from new development. For these and much more, please check out our website at nycfuture.org, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Mr. Dworkin. Do either the chairs or any council members have questions for this panelist? Seeing no questions, we will move on to the next panelist.
Can I ask one question, Alex? I'm sorry. I have one quick
Sure.
question. There is a real push, as you have been saying, and Jonathan, for the last 30 years, to do what's the job, get the industry to suggest it, and then the city workforce to provide it. And that's sort of what you're saying, because that's been disconnected forever. In the innovation economy and the tech startups, we hear about this all this time, the creative, the innovative. It is what I think is EDC, as I keep saying, is doing with life sciences. What specifically should the city be doing to, is it the apprenticeship? Is it some other way to get people into these industries? What specifically would you suggest? You made 4 general excellent suggestions, but is there something more specific?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair Brewer. It's great to see you as always. I mean, I would add 2 quick points. One is, I think this first point that I made about scaling up what's already working is really important. There's, I think, an underappreciation that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have programs that have demonstrated exactly what you're talking about, taking New Yorkers and helping them train for careers in fast-growing industries. To me, the real issue is that even the largest of these programs is serving a few hundred New Yorkers a year when it should be serving thousands. And most of those programs either struggle to access city dollars or don't actually apply for city funding in the first place because the rules are just too restrictive. So my first recommendation to achieve what you're saying is to create a competitive, a race to the top style competitive challenge grant that would actually invest in those programs that are delivering those results. Because the issue is not that we don't know what's working, it's that we really haven't scaled what's working. But to your second point, Chair, I would say apprenticeships are a proven pathway. The city in the last administration set a goal of launching 450 new apprenticeship programs. I'm not so sure the city's reached that goal, frankly. And yet that's a very, I think, modest goal relative to the opportunity to help thousands of New Yorkers prepare for fast-growing careers through apprenticeship models. The city can help to facilitate that by bringing employers to the table together with together with training providers and with CUNY's community colleges who stand at the ready to help implement those trainings. But as you wisely pointed out, that training can't be funded using federal Pell dollars, for instance. So there's a huge opportunity, again, around scale to take those programs that are working, or in this case, to help pilot new initiatives aligned with those fast-growing careers that lead to good jobs and to put some city resources behind that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, I just want to jump in really quickly and reiterate, yes, apprenticeships and apprenticeship models. We see them working in other cities, in other countries. We definitely need to be investing more into that. I just have a quick question around preparation. So have you seen, at least for the city, are we preparing at the bare minimum base foundation and requirements to make participants either more competitive or setting them up for success to going into our apprenticeships or into our job trainings? What I've found personally Like I worked in the transit sector. I had a registered apprenticeship with the Department of Labor and auto diesel mechanic. And a lot of people don't get licenses anymore. And that is a minimum requirement to a lot of fields throughout our city, but also fields obviously in the transit sector. So are you feeling, is there a feeling out there that we are at minimum preparing our future workforce or people coming into our workforce?
Thank you so much, Jeff, for the question. I think you're hitting on a major challenge. I mean, my answer would be, I don't think we are sufficiently preparing folks even to be able to enter into that kind of effective training. And frankly, my colleague, Katie Belsticki, who's speaking next, can speak to this as well, because part of this, I think, is around the need to invest in bridge programs like we've been talking about. The city council funded a really innovative bridge program in partnership with Goodwill to be able to help prepare more New Yorkers to transition into high quality technology training programs. But the reality is that many of the city's most effective training programs and apprenticeship programs, for that matter, are incredibly selective. Training programs are accepting as few New Yorkers as get into NYU, for example. And the reason in part is because we have a million working age New Yorkers without a high school diploma, as you know. There are other folks, working age adults, who lack some of the literacy or numeracy or digital skills to be able to succeed in those training programs. So in part, I think the answer would be investing in much stronger bridge pathways so that more New Yorkers can even gain entry to the high quality but really intensive career training that works. And that would include some of those wraparound supports as well, including childcare, and other supports that are needed to be able to make a full-time, say 16 or 17-week commitment work for working New Yorkers. So unfortunately, to answer your question, I think there are not nearly enough New Yorkers that are actually ready even today for the training that can lead to good jobs, let alone able to access those good jobs right away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dworkin. Next, actually, it seems Katie Belsticki is not here at the moment, so we're going to move on to the following panelists, Carlin Cowan, followed by Christine Borak, and then Ian Strotter. Carlin Cowan, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carlin Cowan, pronouns they, them, and I'm the Chief Policy and Public Affairs Officer at the Chinese American Planning Council, CPC. Thank you, Chair Farias, and the council members here today for the opportunity to testify. CPC is the nation's largest Asian American social services agency, providing services from daycare to senior services and everything in between for 60,000 Asian American immigrant and low-income New Yorkers each year. We have for a long time done workforce training programs for our community members, among others, including construction, hospitality, and retail programs that have really helped our community members completely change the lives of themselves and their families. These programs were incredibly necessary for our immigrant community members pre-pandemic, but since the beginning of the pandemic, the need for these programs has drastically changed. Within the first 6 months of our pandemic, during our wellness surveys to community members, we learned that 50% of our community members had lost jobs or income. By a full year in, that number moved up to 70% of our community members having lost jobs or income or hours during the pandemic. What this means to us is that we need to radically re-envision how workforce development training is done to support our community members during this time. What does that look like? We are proud members of NYC ETC and support all of the recommendations that you've heard from them and their members today. In particular, we want to focus on a couple of things. Because we serve immigrant community members and approximately 2/3 of Asian Americans are English as a second language learners in New York City, we often find that adult literacy programs are actually the first step to workforce training programs for those community members. So having those programs for immigrant community members that are integrated with language access is key for us. Expanding apprenticeship programs and bridge programs makes that also more possible as well. Additionally, making sure that programs are not siloed so that we can really integrate them. Our staff have such creative ideas of how to support our immigrant workforce development attendees, and breaking down those silos will really help with that. The rest I've outlined in my written testimony. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Cowan. If either of the chairs or any of the council members have a question for this panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function now.
She's fabulous all by herself.
Thank you, Ms. Cowan. We'll move on to the next panelist. Next, It looks like both Christine Borak and Ian Strotter are not present, so we're going to move on to Helen Kogan, followed by Dr. Darlene Williams, and then Brian Lozano. Helen Kogan, you may begin when the sergeants announce the timer.
Time starts now.
I'm wondering why you can't see me. All right. I'm gonna do it anyway.
We hear you loud and clear.
Okay, sorry, I'm having some video issues. Good afternoon, it is my pleasure to be here. I am the Executive Director for NPower New York. NPower creates pathways to economic prosperity by launching digital careers for young adults from underserved communities and for military vets. The impact of the pandemic on daily life has elevated the need for access to technology. This has shown a disparate impact on low-income communities, limiting their access to education, healthcare, and employment opportunities. In addition, the pandemic has further illuminated the digital divide. All students that come to NPower are unemployed or underemployed. 71% are Black or Latinx, and over 1/3, almost 40% now, are women. Our programs provide tangible results, improving the shared economic prosperity of our students' families, communities, as well as helping local companies find diverse tech talent. NPower is a free program offering technical training, credentialing, career readiness, wraparound services, paid internships, and job placement into middle skills careers. This year alone, we will train 200 students in New York. During the pandemic, we continue to recruit to our capacity, and our graduation rate last year was 89%, and almost 80% of last year's grads were placed into jobs, a stunning outcome as our last class just graduated 3 months ago. The typical pre-program wage of a young adult entering our program is $8,500. The average annual wage for the first job after NPower is over $55,000. But we cannot do this alone. We need the support of our local government to invest in programs like ours. Otherwise, we will see an even deeper generational slip into poverty, lack of access to good jobs, and a disconnect from the digital community. Workforce development providers are being called on to aid in the city's economic recovery efforts. Investment in skills training and programs like NPower that are working to close the digital skills gap and provide support services is critical to providing our historically underfunded workforce systems adequate resources to serve the needs of both the workers and the businesses that hire them. Without increased resources, our sector cannot maximize their efforts to aid in the city's economic recovery. While individually, our organizations are relatively small, together we serve hundreds of thousands of clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kogan. If either of the chairs have any questions for this panelist, please use the Zoom raise hand function now. We'll move on to our next panelist, seeing no hands raised. We'll move to, oh, go ahead.
I just have a quick question for NPower. Helen, thank you. So where do you get your jobs? Because I know your program when it started, but where are your best success rates? And you obviously need wraparound, just to give me a little sense, because the tech industry is hiring, but they're not always hiring, the types of folks we want to get it to be a more diverse sector. So if you could just talk a little bit about, because it's not just training and the job, there's more that goes into it.
Oh, absolutely. So we work very holistically with our partners. A lot of the corporate partners that fund our programs, like the Citibanks, Bank of America, the Googles, they also hire our graduates. So we believe in operating in an ecosystem. They also volunteer for our program. But our job isn't really to get all of our students into Google, although that would be amazing. Our job is to move the needle and improve the lives of all of our students. Some are Google ready and some folks aren't. And it doesn't matter, because after they graduate, they will find a good job. Our lowest salaries on average are around 40,000. And again, the mid-range is 55. And those jobs and wages impact the families and the communities of the folks that attend our program.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Dr. Darlene Williams, followed by Brian Lozano, and then Michael Roberts. Dr. Darlene Williams, you can begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Darlene Williams, and I am the president and CEO of OBT, where our mission is to break the cycle of poverty and inequity through education, job training, and employment. We focus on meeting individuals where they are and help them meet their goals. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we encountered numerous challenges in our funded programs due to citywide budget shortfalls. OBT received $300,000 less compared to our previous fiscal years, forcing us to reduce the number of full-time counselors serving our community. We serve high-need populations such as homeless and disconnected youth aged 16 to 24, individuals with disabilities, and immigrants. 96% of our participants are people of color. Losing a counselor affects our wraparound support services, which directly impacts our participants in detrimental ways. We strongly believe that we can recover from COVID and empower New Yorkers to succeed, and urge the mayor to invest $250 million in key workforce development initiatives, including 1, increasing our New York City's ability to successfully skill and upskill by providing wraparound support. We need to better understand the barriers to workforce participation, such as childcare, mental health, food insecurity, transportation, and more. 2, we want to improve how we evaluate and use our program data. Increased funding will ensure that we're able to better meet the needs of our participants and our employer partners. 3, expand our ability to offer New Yorkers sector-based programming in healthcare, technology, masonry, childcare, climate-based careers, and more. And 4, digital literacy, because technology skills are essential for all workers. We need to make bold investments that empower participants to use an array of technology services in a fluid manner so that they're equipped. Thank you on behalf of everyone at OBT for giving us this opportunity to testify for the needs and investment that supports New York City's ability to thrive in a post-pandemic economy. Thank you.
Thank you. If either of the chairs have a question, feel free to ask it now. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next panelist. Okay, next up we have Brian Lozano, followed by Michael Roberts, and then Shiri Ferguson Cousins. Brian Lozano, you can begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Chair Farias, Chair Brewer, and members of the committee for hosting this important hearing today. My name is Brian Lozano, and I'm representing Perscolis. We advance economic equity through tuition-free, rigorous training for careers in tech while connecting our graduates to leading businesses in need of talent. Over the past 25 years, we've trained over 8,000 New Yorkers and partnered with over 500 businesses. This year, we plan on training over 800 New Yorkers, the largest in our history. Through the support of the city council, and our funders, Perscolis has been able to make our programs more accessible for New Yorkers. Since the start of the pandemic, we've trained nearly 1,000 learners remotely and mobilized our resources to provide technology to those in need. Along with remote courses, we've implemented a new satellite classroom model where we partner with community-based organizations in neighborhoods that have been underinvested in career-ready workforce programming. We launched 2 successful pilots programs with Common Point Queens and the Jewish Community Center at Staten Island. This new model utilizes our broader workforce ecosystem and allows us to reach wider geography, eliminate onerous commutes, and make our instruction accessible to those whom childcare, employment, and other obligations constrain their flexibility. New Yorkers need programs like Perscolis. Over the past few years, we've developed multiple pathways into our programs, including bridge training with Goodwill and a new cybersecurity bridge program we're launching later this year. These pathways are crucial, but there's still more work to be done and programming to be invested in. We know that for every 1 seat we provide in our programs, we have 6 interested applicants. Our increase in program demand is reflective of the high demand of tech skills in the workforce. Over 915 of our graduates have obtained employment during the pandemic, earning a starting salary of $21 an hour. Perscolis is a proud member of New York City Employment NYC-ETC, and I encourage the council to adopt the coalition's recommendations, including creating a permanent workforce development fund and committing to $100 million annually in new funding toward talent development programs such as bridge programs. Workforce organizations are vital to the economic recovery of the city, and together we can put New Yorkers back to work. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems that Chair Farias has her hand raised, so we'll move to the chair for first questions.
Oh, I think you're on mute, Chair. Oh, okay.
Am I okay? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Thank you for testifying, Brian. I just have a quick question around the cyber classrooms, I believe you said it was called. Have you folks at Perscolis seen an expansion in the reach of participants in terms of like where they live in the Bronx or citywide actually participating in some of these trainings?
Yes. So sorry, it's a satellite, and I maybe it's my pronunciation.
Okay.
So
that's fine.
Yeah, a part. The reason why we did this in the first place is the recognition that where our programs are located is incredibly important in terms of the representation that we have of the city. one example specifically is Staten Island. There's not many workforce career ready programs available on the island, and that program that we implemented is the first of its kind. We typically have 1% of all of our learners coming from Staten Island, and now we've seen a 500% increase. So last year we served a little over 600 New Yorkers, and this year we're serving a little over 800. And that increase is particularly because we've been investing and working with community-based organizations, building these classrooms and giving them on-ramps to do that. We've typically always had a lot of word of mouth folks to come into our program. So we're doing a lot more intentionality in ensuring that, where we're missing, where representation we're lacking, what opportunities and bridges that we can gap, we'll do that with our programming.
Okay, great. And can you just briefly tell me maybe some of the examples of the satellite trainings that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we launched the first 2 pilots with Common Point Queens in Elmhurst and the JCC of Staten Island in Mid-Island and Staten Island. We're launching our next classes in the Stanley Isaac Center, Upper Manhattan, and also in Cypress Hills and with the Cypress Hills Development Corporation. And the classes that we're specifically hosting there is our foundational class, the IT support class, where the minimum requirement is to be 18 and up, have a high school diploma or equivalency, and had to have no technical background. It's been important for us. That program is a little over about 50% of our classes we provide, because it's our early on-ramp, and it's for us, it's how we build careers for folks who don't have any tech backgrounds or even experience in technology.
Okay, so it's mostly or all IT support.
Right now it's all IT support, but this year we're launching our first cybersecurity classes with Common Point in Elmhurst, as well as Stanley Isaac Center in Upper Manhattan.
Okay, and what has direct employment, like job placement, look like?
Yeah, so we had our KPIs are 85% graduation rate, 80% certification rate, and 80% placement rate within 1 year of graduating. We've hit those KPIs, as the pandemic was happening, and it continued to do so. And our satellites, we're adhering to the same exact KPIs for success. The first 2 pilots have been incredibly successful. I think we've hit 100% placement rate so far as well, but it's just one program. So we do this at scale. But it's been really interesting to see, because the point of doing satellite for us is also not just to widen the geography and access, but also maybe to scale 2 organizations working with learners together to be able to hopefully to make it a more cost-effective way for us to invest in learners.
Great. Last question. What's Perscolus's length of tracking? Is it 6 months, 9 months, a year?
2 years.
2 years.
So our typical investment for learners is it's obviously not just after they do the 12 to 15 week program. It's for us, it's not, I think Helen mentioned this, a lot of our other colleagues mentioned this, it's not about the first job, it's about a career. So, for a lot of the folks that are coming in with 0 years of experience, that first job is often like a smaller contractor position for 3 to 6 months, building up to the next job and the next job and the next job.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alex, I have one other quick question, Brian, and thank you for the many years of your service, but also for the program that we love. So we are talking a little bit about, 21 agencies, silos, et cetera. I think if you scale up, you could certainly, with more funding, you could do even more jobs because they're out there. So 2 questions. What would you need to scale up? And then second, is there a silo? I'm obviously asking somewhat of a redundant question, but how would you break down some of those silos? Because your students need them. And then of course, would it be possible at some point to have enough wraparound services, bridge programs, whatever, to have non-high school degree individuals? So those are my questions.
All great questions, Chair Brewer. I would say first and foremost, it's going to just be we need more investment. Period. It right now roughly costs Perscola about $8,000 per learner to come into our systems, and we're hoping to scale that down by expanding it with satellite. A lot of the recommendations that NYC ETC provides, especially when it comes to investment into the workforce ecosystem, is everything that we would recommend. And yes, for sure, I think there can be a lot of an opportunity for a lot more coordination, especially within the workforce ecosystem. The way that we see it is, this is an ecosystem. We're working with folks that are coming straight from digital literacy all the way to career ready programming, and we don't want to lose anybody that's coming from our, throughout that pipeline. So the idea here is we even as organizations, we're working together a lot like a part of the satellite model was to demonstrate that we can work together in partnership, as two organizations serving communities in need. So I think there can definitely be a lot more coordination amongst that. And I think the other thing that's going to be important here, is opportunity for pathways for further employment. We obviously work with employers similar to a lot of our other colleagues and build those relationships. But I think there's even more opportunity to even do pathways to employment with government when possible. And I know that's a little bit difficult, but I think there's also opportunities there as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lozano. Next, we will hear from Michael Roberts, followed by Shiri Ferguson Cousins, and then Valerie Payne. Mr. Roberts, you can begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Hi, thank you. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to speak to Chairwoman Brewer and Chairwoman Ferris. Today, I really want to talk about income eligibilities that are creating an equity and access issue for many working poor young people. The income levels that are used for people to enter city and state training programs are so low and antiquated that most working poor families cannot get into these programs. So when people talk about retention and completion, we're not getting the right candidates into the pipelines who could be successful and complete. The barriers that come with abject poverty are huge, and an 8-week bridge program cannot rectify all of that. There's mental health issues, there's domestic violence, there's placement, housing. Most bridge programs are made for a different young person and a different young adult. CYD, Comprehensive Youth Development, has been working for 27 years with transfer schools across New York City and high schools and older youth. We were lucky enough to run a pilot on private money where we partnered with CUNY, the Borough of Manhattan Community College Department of Development, and did a medical assisting program. And we found in the first 3 cohorts on private money, 80% of students completed everything and got jobs. And as we move to DYCD and WIOA funding, based on those barriers and criteria they asked for, we're in the 60th percentile. I also feel that's an equity issue. We're not allowing those workers that really could take advantage of these job placement programs to be a part of it. So I'm asking that you look at those barriers, you look at the history of it, and we will send a paper to you with all that about the poverty indicators used here in New York City. But that is a big recommendation, which I think would help us get more young people, the right young people, into the pipelines we're looking for all the jobs that are being created right now. Employers tell me they can't find the workers, right? We're not getting them the widest pool, and it has to start earlier in our high schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, please feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we're going to move on to the next panelist, Shiri Ferguson Cousins, followed by Valerie Payne, and then Michael Conway. Ms. Ferguson Cousins, you may begin when the sergeants call time.
Time starts now.
Shiri Cousins, please unmute. We've asked you to unmute, so please unmute. There you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I am Shiri Ferguson Cousins, the AVP of Workforce Development at Goodwill Industries of Greater New York and Northern New Jersey. We're a local nonprofit that has helped New Yorkers connect to employment for over a century. Goodwill is committed to supporting the city job recovery efforts in the wake of the pandemic. Our Bridge Tech program aligns with the city's workforce development plan to create 100,000 jobs by 2027 in an equitable way through local hiring. Our 5-week full-time program provides New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs with literacy and numeracy skills needed to get prepared for advanced technology training programs and to connect to in-demand tech jobs. I know Perscola spoke briefly. Our Bridge program currently moves people into Perscola's cyber and desktop support. Receiving referrals for our Bridge program has been challenging due to the pandemic. The program is designed to serve job seekers from HRA workforce development contracts. Mandatory participation in these programs is still suspended, which has diminished the pool of candidates. In addition, we are unable to refer unvaccinated clients to training partners who require participants to be vaccinated. This affects our ability to support New Yorkers who are seeking advanced training. To combat these challenges, we transformed our operations into a hybrid model and expanded recruitment efforts, embracing the opportunities created by offering hybrid. For example, without transportation as a barrier, we are serving people from all 5 boroughs. We're also offering online job fairs, work readiness workshops, and resource fairs. Goodwill strongly believes in the importance of bridge programming, and additional funding would allow us to expand this innovative program model to other sectors. Expanding bridge programming will result in more New Yorkers completing advanced training with the skills and credentials needed to succeed in a job, putting them on a career pathway, upward mobility, and high earning potential. Removing barriers is part of Goodwill's mission, and a critical component of our bridge program is the wraparound support provided to all students. We must ensure that all students in training programs have access to comprehensive 360-degree wraparound supports. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson-Cousins. If the chairs have a question for this panelist, please ask it now. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Valerie Payne, followed by Michael Conway, and then Terrence Byerson. Ms. Payne, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. Thanks so much for allowing me to testify today. Pleased to be here. My name is Valerie Payne. I'm the Executive Director of Rebuilding Together New York City and an Executive Committee member of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. Rebuilding Together New York City provides critical home repair and accessibility modifications for low-income homeowners, reskills individuals for careers in construction, and provides opportunities for New Yorkers to revitalize community spaces. I agree with many of the points my colleagues have made here today and wholeheartedly support the New York City Employment and Training Coalition's recommendations. As we've discussed, there are way too many New Yorkers that are not being supported and are unable to compete in our own labor market. And we need a new public agenda that intentionally connects economic and workforce development. However, we are not starting from scratch. We have many local assets upon which to build, highlighted in the recent Blueprint for Economic Recovery. We have new leadership in the mayor's office and a strong network of workforce development organizations, the members of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition. Specifically, I want to offer my support for the recommendation to commit $250 million to launch an extensive reemployment program to support the millions of New Yorkers who remain unemployed, and fund new program innovation and development with at least $100 million in new funding per year. Rebuilding Together New York City's Careers in Construction program is part of this solution. We're alongside New and Pathways to Apprenticeship, although we are far younger. We provide a pre-apprenticeship certificate training designed to reskill individuals for careers in construction, and we serve those hardest hit by the pandemic. We recruit and serve students from all 5 boroughs. After the pandemic forced us to quarantine, we were able to relaunch 3 months later, providing our training online. And wow, I've reached time. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to testify, and I'll submit my written testimony, which is a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, please feel free to ask it now.
I had a question, but if you'd like to continue on, Valerie, you can.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Our program is free, and graduates earn a financial stipend, which has been discussed today. We also are a direct entry provider and provide industry recognized and required certifications, including OSHA 30 site safety training, flagger, and scaffold. Demand for our program is high. We are in the process of developing a shorter program for individuals currently employed in non-union construction jobs who are interested in becoming an apprentice and joining one of the trades. We are incredibly grateful to have received support from DYCD, NYCHA, and former City Council members Mark Traeger and Alika Ampry-Samuel. With additional support and funds, we could easily triple our efforts and reskill many more New Yorkers in incredibly well-paying apprenticeships with career advancement opportunities, continuing education, and amazing benefits, and a variety of trade unions. As you probably know, the construction industry is scaling up and on track again to add jobs over the coming years. And I'll stop there. Thank you so much for listening and for your support.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Next, we will move to Michael Conway, followed by Terrence Byerson, and then Bishop Mitchell-Taylor. Mr. Conway, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, I'm Mike Conway, Executive Director and co-founder of Stacks and Jewels. Stacks and Jewels provides technology workforce training for the building automation system industry. These are vital tech jobs, essential in meeting the mandates of Local Law 97 because they enable the optimization of energy use in buildings. There's huge unmet demand for these jobs. Since 2019, with a grant from NYSERDA, we have fully trained 121 public CTE and transfer high school students, and they've earned over 170 industry recognized certifications, 96 paid internships, and five have secured jobs right out of high school. We're currently working with another 80 students across 3 schools, including one cohort of all young women. We also partner with the venerable Henry Street Settlement in supporting an adult cohorts through a second grant from NYSERDA. Our first cohort of 21 adults have so far earned over 65 certifications and 17 have secured a variety of jobs. And we partner with a growing group of building automation companies and professionals. It is they that guide our curriculum and validate our quality through our hiring. It's important to note that we do not impose prerequisites on our access to high-tech training. Bridging systemic barriers to these important, well-paying jobs can require doubling down. So please don't totally discount doubling up. Strategic partnerships compound investments. With your support for increased, reliable funding, we can expand our proven program to serve overlooked, underappreciated talent in every borough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we will move on to the next panelist. First up is Terrence Byerson, followed by Bishop Mitchell Taylor, and then Evie Litwack. Mr. Byerson, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Terrence Byerson, and I am the Community Relations Manager for Strive. I'd like to thank the council members for having me here tonight to discuss what Strive does. Strive is a workforce development organization located on the east side of Harlem. We've been here since 1984. Our main objective is to help individuals with all types of barriers to receive training, as well as get them gainful employment. When I say barriers, I could be talking about criminal justice, housing insecurity, educational, any barrier that one may have that may preclude them from getting training and receiving jobs. During the pandemic, we served over 5,000 we reached out to over 5,000 of our past alumni. We pivoted with hotspots and also with laptops for our current students. We currently have 3 programs running. We were awarded 2 contracts by the DOL, one for the reentry community called our Fresh Start program for individuals just coming home, and the Future Leaders program, which is a program geared toward 18 to 24-year-old youth that's been affected by the criminal justice system. Like all of our programs, we provide training, we provide wraparound services, because as the speaker Brewer said earlier, we cannot just get a person a job and then they go home and they have food insecurity or they have issues with mental health. So we try to provide all wraparound services for all of our participants so that when they do get the job, there are no barriers to preclude them from going to work. We provide clothes, we provide any information that they may need in order to help them remain successful. We are currently, like I said, running 2 new programs, and I am in agreement with everything NYTC is projecting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byerson. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now.
Terrence, it's Gail. I have a question, which is when you do the wraparound services, because you have the same issue, Fortune has the same, all the different programs have the same issue. So do you coordinate? Is there, I worry about the silo situation. So how does that work either with the other folks who are working with people who have been incarcerated? How do you find the employers? How does the city help you, et cetera? I just want to know about this making
Okay.
sure that everybody gets the support they need, not just a job, but how does it actually work?
Definitely. Well, we do work with other community-based organizations like Fortune, like Exodus, like GoSo. So we do have partnerships with them, and we also we use each other. So it is a chain because we're all in the same business. So we want everybody to be able to succeed. If you can't succeed with Strive, you may be able to succeed with the Fortune Society based on your schedule. So we do have great partnerships with those organizations, especially because we're all in the same area. We're right across the street from Exodus and GoSo. So yes, we do, and we have a team of dedicated team of about 5 job developers and employee specialists at Strive that go out there and create relationships with certain organizations. Like we have a great relationship with Mount Sinai Hospital. We have a great relationship with Northwell Health. So our employee specialists and job developers create those relationships for our participants so that if there are any problems or anything that we can handle, they know that we are there to help them succeed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Byerson. And next we will hear from Bishop Mitchell Taylor, followed by Evie Litwack, and then Rebecca Lurie. Bishop Mitchell Taylor, you may begin when the sergeants call the time.
Time starts now.
All right, they just unmuted me. Good afternoon to the council and to the Committee on Economic Development on today. Thank you. My name is Bishop Mitchell G. Taylor. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Urban Upbound. Urban Upbound was founded in 2004 as East River Development Alliance, affectionately known as URDA, to break cycles of poverty, intergenerational poverty in public housing neighborhoods and other low-income communities. We provide underserved youth and adults with the tools and resources needed to achieve economic prosperity and self-sufficiency through 6 comprehensive integrated programs, including workforce development, one-on-one financial counseling, youth development, both academic and vocational, income supports, tax preparation, community revitalization through business innovation, financial inclusion, all anchored by the Urban Upbound Federal Credit Union. We believe in giving people a hand up, not a handout. And in order to best serve our neighbors, it is critical that we are physically present in the communities that we serve. That's why we run job and empowerment centers at Queensbridge, Astoria, Ravenswood, Far Rockaway, East Harlem, Brooklyn, and a new center opening this year in Flushing. We appreciate the City Council and the administration for the funding that allows us to serve over 15,000 New Yorkers annually. Our communities have been among the hardest hit during the pandemic. Nights residents have always been disproportionately affected by the crisis and systematic discrimination. Residents have lost jobs and whatever savings they had, incurring debt to be able to sustain themselves. Our efforts and assistance made a difference, but there's so much more to do. And we'd like to do it in partnership with the council. Urban Upbound has been a pioneer in the field of workforce development, social services. Our services were rooted in the MDRC's Jobs Plus model years before the city established the first Jobs Plus site that was launched by our co-founder, Deborah Ellen Glickstein. We are convinced past administrations of,
Time expired.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Bishop Mitchell Taylor. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we'll now move on to Evie Litwack, followed by Rebecca Lurie, and then Malat Sayum. Ms. Litwack, you may begin when the sergeants announce the timer.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Evie Litwack. I am a formerly incarcerated lesbian and the executive director of Witness to Mass Incarceration. My constituents are incarcerated and formerly incarcerated people. Prior to my incarceration, I had a 30-year work history with 12 years on Wall Street and 10 in the nonprofit world. I didn't get a single response from the 200 job applications I submitted. As a result, me, and like me, hundreds of formerly incarcerated people are starting small businesses. I went to nonprofits serving formerly incarcerated people, got a resume, employment training, practice interview, and a few job opportunities. Cobbled together, these services did not offer me a long-term solution. The 30 years of reentry programs have not reduced recidivism, nor have they resulted in long-term employment. This one-size-fits-all transactional model does not work. And if it's the same as used for employment training, it will not work. We propose a transformational model which creates an economic ecosystem led by and for formerly incarcerated businesses. We've developed the first of its online directory listing formerly incarcerated people. And by way of explanation, the Association for Enterprise Opportunity revealed Black business owners have a median net worth that is 12 times that of Black wage earners. However, Black business owners only earn 1/10 of the income of white business owners. And just to understand further, white men own 2.875 million small businesses. Black women own 41,250. The MAP project is a multi-year initiative of 6 phases. We believe the model will reduce recidivism and create the long-term employment, in part through businesses and apprenticeships. However, there's another caveat. It needs to be run by formerly incarcerated people. We have a shared experience which makes us trusted messengers, family, and community. My parents are Holocaust survivors. They came to this country stateless, starving, with $2.50.
Time expired.
I have one paragraph. May I? Oh. Yes. I watched as they and their fellow survivors helped each other rebuild their lives. They had a shared experience no one could understand, and they built community because of their shared suffering. The formerly incarcerated community has a shared life experience, and when we meet each other, we are family. Let us build the infrastructure so that we can allow thousands of small businesses to begin the process of creating wealth for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Litwack. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we will move on to the next panelist. Next up is Rebecca Lurie, followed by Malat Seyum, and then Derek Bowers. Rebecca Lurie, you can begin when the sergeants call the timer.
Time starts now.
Greetings and thank you. What an honor it is to testify for you, Councilmember Farias and Councilmember Brewer. Really a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I run a program at CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies, Community and Worker Ownership Project. And here we promote, teach, learn, and network for skills and economic development that is centered in community engagement, worker power, and deep democracy. There is a level of awareness I want to interject here that workforce development, as it evolved, asks our programming to solve deeper problems of generational injustices and unequal distribution of resources. And I can go on about that, but my time is limited. I want to talk about the silos of the workforce programs from business development and the potential of a job guarantee. Councilmember Brewer referred to 70 programs and 21 agencies. I want to add the fact that beyond the short order work of our workforce development programs requiring a 90-day deliverable, we have multiple means in our city to support businesses and their workers, not least, but most important here, straight up economic development, and also far from least, our public education system. I have over 35 years of working in our city's workforce, first as a union carpenter and then teaching workers in the union's apprenticeship program and several pre-apprenticeship programs. I understand severely how much it gets driven by industry and what they need. Certified apprenticeship has that baked into the job descriptions, pay, and titles to advance from novice to expert in companies. When I was running a culinary program in New York, in Queens, we were advised to not accept people who were looking to start their own business. We were told the outcomes of business startup would not let us meet our milestones. Small businesses and even micro businesses for BIPOC entrepreneurs need broadening support, as was just spoken by an earlier speaker. The training for worker and the training for business owners needs to be blended. Every worker going through training for a particular job skills I'll just finish, thank you, can also learn how these businesses work. So people who move through our training programs can consider a level of self-employment where they are creating a few good jobs in their small companies. Self-employment is one of the largest growing aspects of work today. Worker cooperatives is a model when workers are also the owners and work collaboratively to run the companies they are part of. We need to incorporate cooperative business training to serve the fact that self-employment may well mean folks will start companies with support from our workforce programs. Supporting business development with social goals should be a fundamental aspect of city-supported economic development. The apprenticeship model pays people as they enter work. This can be supported with a financing model where the business is rewarded with a wage subsidy or a paid job guarantee that will subsidize engagement as beginners develop in their position. I sit on the EDC's Offshore Wind Advisory Council and want to add that we need to understand long-term changes in the market will not answer the short-term demands of the workforce development programming.
Rebecca, you gotta summarize because we've got too many more people.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. And I hope that with a job guarantee, giving people a paycheck now, they can earn while they learn and help us with creating what is really be an innovative green economy for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lurie. Next, we will move to the next panelist, Milat Seyum, followed by Derek Bowers, and then Antu Gwen. Milat Seyum, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, Honorable Chairperson and distinguished members of the New York City Council Committee on Economic Development. My name is Milat Seyum. I'm the Worker Co-op Policy Advocate for the New York City Network of Worker Cooperatives, also known as NCNOC. We are the local trade association representing worker cooperative businesses and democratic workplaces in New York City metropolitan area. I'm here alongside my colleagues from the Democracy at Work Institute, the Working World, Workers' Justice Project, and the NCNOC Advocacy Council members, representing 9 other organizations that make up the Worker Cooperative Business Development Initiative, WCBDI, asking New York City Council to continue supporting the expansion of worker ownership in next year's budget and firmly into the future. Since the inception of the initiative, we have created over 175 new cooperative businesses and approximately 1,000 new jobs that are not only providing higher hourly wages, but also building wealth and assets for individuals who are overwhelmingly BIPOC women and immigrants. We have also seen firsthand how the initiative has served to bolster our sector, strengthening existing cooperative businesses and creating new ones, which are overwhelmingly immigrant and women-owned. The initiative partners have collectively worked to create a comprehensive ecosystem of support for cooperative businesses that not only ensures the creation of new worker cooperatives in low-income areas, but also technical assistance needed to sustain businesses and create jobs, as well as the education and outreach needed for communities, interested entrepreneurs, and allied organizations. We asked the City Council to enhance our funding to $5,012,000 in order for our initiative to double down on the essential long-term economic recovery for cooperative businesses that will be needed to claw ourselves out of this crisis. We thank the City Council for the opportunity to testify. We hope that you will consider our budget priorities and recommendation during this year's budget negotiation process. Thank you.
Thank you, Milat. If any of the chairs, either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we will move on to the next panelist. Next up, we have Derek Bowers, followed by Antu Gwen, and then Merble Reagan. Derek Bowers, you may begin when the sergeants announce the time.
Time starts now.
Thank you to Chair Farias, Chair Brewer, and members of the committees. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Derek Bowers, and I'm the Director of Social Enterprise in New York City for the Center for Employment Opportunities, also known as CEO. CEO is a nonprofit organization that was founded in New York City in 1996 and provides comprehensive employment support to individuals who have recently returned home from incarceration, including transitional work and daily pay. CEO believes that every person returning from incarceration should have the opportunity for full participation in society and be provided the support needed to achieve social and economic mobility. At CEO, we know that a job can prevent a return to incarceration. And many returning citizens, especially those who have limited work experience, need stronger supports and on-ramps into the world of work. Achieving our vision of economic mobility requires city investment and incentives to create more high-quality jobs for individuals coming home from incarceration. As a member of the New York City Employment and Training Coalition, we urge the next administration to adopt the Inclusive Growth Blueprint. Specific to job seekers with past convictions, we also recommend the following. 1, invest in transitional jobs during reentry as a bridge to permanent employment. 2, investing in alternatives to incarcerations and in reentry services. 3, provide financial incentives to businesses that hire individuals coming home from incarceration. 4, create procurement structures at the federal, state, and local level that require government contractors and agencies to hire a certain percentage of workers with a conviction history or who have experienced incarceration. 5, eliminate structural regulations that prevent individuals with felony convictions from accessing work sites. Despite recognition that a key purpose of the workforce system is to help people reconnect to the labor market, many recently incarcerated individuals are shut out of the workforce system and its training programs due to a variety of policy and systemic barriers. And the following changes can address the primary barriers that keep them from accessing these training programs, which facilitate access to high-quality jobs. 1, increase workforce funding for stipends and support people while they are in training programs. 2, expand eligibility criteria for apprenticeship programs and fund pre-apprenticeships that facilitates training and access to ensure equitable access to opportunities. And finally, end incarceration labor programs that financially exploit individuals while they are incarcerated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowers. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Antu Nguyen, followed by Merville Regan, and then Sarah Hayes. Antu, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chair Farias, Chair Brewer, council members. My name is Antu Nguyen, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Democracy at Work Institute, or DAWI. I'm testifying as both a member of the Worker Cooperative Business Development Initiative, or WCBDI, and NYC ETC. We've seen best practices in inspiring transformation through integrating worker ownership with workforce development, creating better jobs, improved industry standards, and economic stability and mobility for working families. I will share 2 New York City success stories that have become national models for high road businesses and workforce development. First, Cooperative Home Care Associates, which has been based in the South Bronx for 37 years. It is the largest worker cooperative in the country and has positively transformed home health care, a traditionally low wage, high turnover industry where the vast majority of workers are BIPOC immigrant women, raising job quality and industry standards through worker ownership and continuous investment in an embedded on-the-job training and skills development program. This workforce development model operates on a seamless continuum from recruitment to training, certification, placement, and employment, producing incredible workforce development results. For example, of 630 job seekers enrolled annually with CHCA's training program, 94% graduate with a portable credential, 85% are employed as home health aides. Of those, 68% remain employed after 1 year. All program graduates are guaranteed a job with CHCA if they wish. In comparison, according to the National Benchmarking Project, similar low-income training programs on average secure employment with only 29% of enrollees, and just those 38% remain employed after 1 year. Another example, at DAWI, we partnered with the CUNY Institute of Mexican Studies to incubate and demonstrate another model for workforce development and social entrepreneurship, Radiate Consulting. We work together to identify promising entrepreneurial graduates with barriers to employment and want to develop their careers as nonprofit service providers, providing wraparound services as they build their business, connect with clients, and build as emerging young professionals and worker owners. We urge City Council to continue investing in worker cooperatives and the workforce development ecosystem in New York City through enhancing WCBDI funding to $5.012 million for fiscal year 23, establishing a dedicated and permanent workforce development fund that provides sustainable long-term funding for employment and training programs across all agencies and initiatives, and funding a new training program, innovation development program with at least $100 million in new funding per year that includes worker cooperatives as part of workforce development, innovation, and training. Thanks for the opportunity to speak about this. Worker cooperatives is an innovative workforce development strategy. Looking forward to working together.
Thank you. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Merville Regan, followed by Sarah Hayes, and then Kate Krug. Merville Regan, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Thank you very much to the committee chairs and the council members for the opportunity to talk today. Excuse me, I am Merville Regan, Executive Director of the Women's Center for Education and Career Advancement. We were an organization organized in 1970, and for the first 40 years, we developed programs and services, including college degree programs, small business programs, skills training for over 25,000 women. In recent years, we're better known for our research and technology development related to workforce development. In the written testimony, I'll go into more detail about the Women's Center and our partners. We have developed something called, which is our 6th New York City self-sufficiency report since the year 2000. It's called Overlooked and Undercounted 2021, Struggling to Make Ends Meet in New York City. Since the year 2000, the cost of basic needs on average across New York City boroughs have increased 113%, while median earnings have increased by only 58%. We think that the report highlights the importance that ensuring that New York City's evolving workforce development plans in the wake of the pandemic be laser focused on addressing both the historic wage inequality for women and people of color and the economic realities of what New York City's working families actually need to make ends meet. The evidence in the report supports initiatives already underway to address wage inequities, such as the Just Pay campaign to support fair wages for human services workers under contract with New York City and New York State, and the New York City salary range law, which we commend the New York City Council for passing and hope that enforcement will also be supported. The data. Thank you. There's more information in my written testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Regan. Either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next, we will hear from Sarah Hayes, followed by Kate Krug, and then Joseph McDonald. Ms. Hayes, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah E. Hayes, Deputy Director for the Economic Empowerment Program at Sanctuary for Families, New York City's largest provider of services exclusively for survivors of domestic violence and related forms of gender violence. We thank the Committee on Economic Development and its chair, Council Member Amanda Farias, and Council Member Brewer for the opportunity to speak today. Sanctuary is immensely grateful for the City Council's steadfast support of our work over the years and its unwavering commitment to addressing issues facing gender-based violence survivors. When former Mayor Bill de Blasio announced the Career Pathways Initiative in late 2014, we were thrilled. His Jobs for New Yorkers task force literally spoke our language, calling for an unprecedented full system shift towards a career pathways model. And the Career Pathways report noted how the city's workforce development funds were overwhelmingly allocated to programs that connect job seekers to entry-level positions with low wages and limited advancement prospects, while only a small percentage supports training programs that can provide skills that lead to career track jobs with opportunities for advancement. And for over 4 years, running a pioneering career training program for domestic violence survivors with virtually very little public funding, we finally felt like we were being heard. And yet, since the landmark Career Pathways report in 2014, and even in the wake of the October 2019 Comptroller's report identifying domestic violence as the leading cause of family homelessness in NYC, no RFP has been released identifying domestic violence survivors as a priority population for workforce funding. The City Council and some of its individual members have allocated a few small discretionary grants to EEP, and the program was awarded a substantial 3-year grant from the Manhattan District Attorney's Criminal Justice Investment Initiative several years ago, which is now expired. However, many appeals to the administration for systemic funding of this work have gone unanswered. EEP helps clients break down barriers that have long kept the door to the 21st century economy closed.
Time expired.
Just a little bit more for poor women. The 4-month career readiness training program delivers advanced office technology training, leading to stackable certifications in Microsoft Office, along with structured English and math literacy training. And during COVID, we transformed this training for virtual delivery and have provided over 200 participants with new laptops, hotspots, and internet service plans to facilitate participation, bridging the digital divide since March 2020. Overall, in the past decade, it's delivered digital trainings to over 1,000 women and 950 graduates to date, obtaining over 550 jobs. Solid placement numbers, but its wage outcomes are really what stand out. And in the last 3 years, graduates have earned over $12 million in aggregate wages. Clients have secured nearly 100 job placements in the past 14 months with average salaries over $43,000 per year. In the first program, placements in early 2022 are averaging over $55,000. Additional information can be found in the submitted testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next group of panelists. Next, we will hear from Kate Krug, followed by Joseph McDonald, and then Sinead Wadsworth. Kate Krug, you may begin when the sergeants call the time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kate Krug. I am the Executive Vice President at Non-Traditional Employment for Women, or NEW. Thank you, Chair Faris and Brewer, Speaker, Council members, and staff who put this hearing together. I also want to thank SBS and Jackie Mellon for her continued commitment to women and construction and a keen focus on climate change, childcare, and bridges to pre-apprenticeships, meeting women where they're at. I'm here today representing NEW as a member of the New York City Employment Training Coalition, and we're requesting increased investments in key workforce development initiatives like the $250 million for COVID re-employment programs. The workforce ecosystem in New York City is in need of a stronger economic support to help New Yorkers facing employment barriers and those with impeded access to economic opportunities, especially New Yorkers from communities that have been historically marginalized and disinvested, like the low-income Black and Brown women and women facing childcare concerns, women that NEW supports and serves. This has been paralleled by increased need and demand for workforce services from both New Yorkers, employers, and small businesses. NEW will leverage its 44 years of vital work preparing low-income women for high-paying careers and skilled trades and continue to provide wraparound services such as increasing access to childcare to enhance access to construction, education, and careers. As many of you know, NEW's programming transformed the lives of women across New York City by providing pathways to careers in the building and construction trades. These careers offer financial security with wages starting at $19 per hour and access to middle-class wages, benefits through unions, opening doors to stability and resources for women and their families. The Bureau of Labor Statistics finds that unionized women make on average 23% more than women without a union. As a member of the New York City Employment Training Coalition and leader in workforce development opportunities, such as a founding member of the Green Economy Network, we turn to you now and we're looking for tangible new investments, implementation plans, and an equal seat at the table to help New Yorkers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Krug. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now.
I do have a quick question, Kate, and congratulations on everything that NEW has done and will do. So again, back to this issue of if you can't figure out, nobody can in terms of wraparound for your members and so on. So are there still gaps in services that you would like to see filled? Obviously, I think I know, you know, all the issues that need to be addressed. So the question is, you know, because the biggest change probably is the construction apprenticeship program in terms of money. All the others are great. Yours is the best in terms of having a middle-class career, union, and so on for the women you serve. So are there gaps that a less siloed workforce ecosystem could address?
Yeah, I think working together to face the impediment that childcare services, being able to create a voucher system, a cash assistance program, a stipend program, to leave it in the hands of those that we're serving to make the decisions and have their own autonomy, to help them figure out how they can get to access their training and education opportunities, and then of course their placement opportunities, and not just focusing that on construction where it's non-traditional hours and have all of these other layers to it, but also, as you said, bringing it to the larger workforce development ecosystem and really helping to remove that barrier of the childcare burden that's kind of stopping people from being able to access just opportunities.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Krug. Next, we'll hear from Joseph McDonald, followed by Sinead Wadsworth, and then Ashima Goshin. Joseph McDonald, you can begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm Joseph McDonald, co-president of the Institute for Career Development, a 105-year-old nonprofit workforce development provider that has helped more than 250,000 New Yorkers with disabilities transform their lives. Throughout our history, we've adjusted our focus periodically to capitalize on new opportunities to support New Yorkers with disabilities. We've recently made one of those adjustments. Working with the renowned nonprofit consulting firm, the Bridgespan Group, we've identified a major gap in serving people with disabilities in New York City that, if filled, could enhance career opportunities earlier in life. That gap exists in the transition from school to career, during which school-based supports end and career opportunities have not yet arisen. We are focusing on youth with disabilities while they are in high school to better prepare them to make the jump to college or vocational training and to start their careers. Our approach is to work within public schools to create long-term, individualized, holistic career plans for and with students with disabilities, their families, and their communities to increase graduation and employment. While ICD is making the initial investments to launch this pilot program, scaling its impact to help more New Yorkers with disabilities will depend on growing support from a network of partners, including government agencies. For that reason, we're pleased to testify today in support of NYC ETC's recommendation that a permanent workforce development fund be created to provide sustainable long-term funding for employment and training programs. Two elements of this proposal that are crucial. First, that it be permanent, and second, that it be flexible and provide support across agencies and initiatives. For the work that we do to be most effective, its components cannot be siloed. Yet all too often, city funding is unnecessarily difficult to apply for and restrictive in its application. The result is that service providers lose time and money working to weave together various strands of funding for different purposes from different sources to be able to provide services in a holistic way that sees, serves, and preserves the dignity of people with disabilities seeking employment. A permanent centralized workforce development fund that recognizes the need to support holistic career services for young people with disabilities would be an incredible economic engine for New York City. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. If either of the chairs have a question, please ask them now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next group of panelists. Next up will be Sinead Wadsworth, followed by Lashima Goshin, and then Diana Kaba. Sinead Wadsworth, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sinead Wadsworth. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. My name is Sinead Wadsworth. I'm a representative for the New York City District Council of Carpenters and a student and graduate of Non-Traditional Employment for Women 10 years ago. Thank you, Chair Farias and Gail Brewer, and the Speaker of the Council and members of the Council who put this hearing together. I also want to thank you for your long-standing commitment to NEW, as well as for your continued support for gender equity of the New York City and for New York City tradeswomen like myself. I am here today representing NEW as a member of the New York City Employment Training Coalition, and we're requesting increased investments in key workforce development initiatives, like $250 million for the COVID reemployment programs. The workforce ecosystem in New York City is in need of stronger economic support to help New Yorkers facing employment barriers and those with impeded access to economic opportunities, especially New Yorkers from communities that have been historically marginalized and disinvested, like the low-income Black and Brown women that NEW supports and serves. This has been paralleled by an increased need and demand for workforce services from both New Yorkers and employers and small businesses. NEW will leverage its 44 years of vital work preparing low-income women for high-paying careers in the skilled trades towards enhancing access to such careers among historically marginalized communities. As many of you know, NEW's programming transforms the lives of women across New York City by providing pathways to careers in the building trade, especially for women like myself who grew up in NYCHA. And I can say that this career has changed my life for the better. These careers have offered financial security with starting wages at $19 per hour. The Bureau of Labor Statistics finds that unionized women make on average 23% more than women without a union. As a member of the New York City Employment Training Coalition and leader in workforce development, opportunities for low-income Black and Brown women in New York, we turn to you now. We're looking for tangible new investments, implementation plans, and equal seats at the table to help New Yorkers. Thank you so much for your support now, and thank you so much for your continued support in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Wadsworth. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Lashima Goshin, followed by Diana Kaba, and then Larry Rothschild. Lashima Goshin, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. My name is Lashima Gosheim. On behalf of Jewish Home Life Care Manhattan, or the New Jewish Home Manhattan, I want to thank you, Chairs Farias and Brewer, and the members of the Committee on Economic Development and Committee on Oversight and Investigations for the opportunity to testify today. I work at the New Jewish Home as a program manager for its Geriatrics Career Development High School program, a workforce development training program for underserved young people in New York City. I love my job because GCD transforms lives, both the lives of young people and older adults. We do this by creating a pipeline of highly trained healthcare workers. The New York City Council is already a part of this transformation through discretionary funding allocations. We are so grateful to you and hope to count on your continued support. GCD exists to bridge the gap between geriatric care job openings and underserved young people. The staffing shortage is now a full-blown crisis. Meanwhile, young people are disconnected from school and work at alarmingly high rates. GCD prepares young people for living wage jobs in healthcare. GCD provides hands-on experience, paid internships, job training, and courses in healthcare certifications aligned with the needs of the healthcare industry. Each year, GCD serves approximately 275 participants ages 14 to 24 at no cost to them. GCD currently partners with 10 under-resourced public high schools to serve students in grades 10 to 12 through a 3-year after-school, out-of-school time program. GCD also trains young adults ages 18 to 24 who are not in school and unemployed through a 3-month full-time program. Of our nearly 1,000 program graduates since 2006, 91% are currently employed, enrolled in post-secondary programs or both. GCD also builds pathways to college for hundreds of young people. As a 2000 graduate from GCD's high school program, I can personally attest to its power. I graduated from Mary Curie High School on time. As a GCD graduate, I was a certified nursing assistant right out of high school. Working as a CNA caring for older adults enabled me to important work while also broadening my understanding of career opportunities in the healthcare field. Today, I have a master's in public health. I learned a lot through the mentorship aspect and becoming a professional leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gosheim. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, please ask it now. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up, we'll hear from Diana Kaba, followed by Larry Rothschild, and then Karen Emas. Diana Kaba, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chairs Brewer and Farias, and all committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Diana Cava, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Policy and Community Engagement at Hispanic Federation, a nonprofit organization seeking to empower and advance Hispanic communities through community programs and legislative advocacy. Our testimony today is also informed by over 38 Latino nonprofit organizations in all 5 boroughs that contributed to the development of La Gran Manzana, the road ahead for New York City's Latino community. A policy blueprint with recommendations on how the New York City Mayor and Council can improve the lives of nearly 2.5 million Latinos who call New York City home. New York City's economy has been significantly shaken by the pandemic. The COVID-19 lockdowns cost Latino families their jobs and their businesses. For the poorest Latino New Yorkers, the loss of employment meant long lines at community food banks and concerns over being evicted from their homes. The economic recovery from this crisis will require significant investment from the city. Much of that recovery will depend on addressing immediate concerns such as jobs, small business support, hunger relief, and importantly, affordable housing and eviction protection. It will be especially important to craft an economic recovery agenda that reaches Latinos in all 5 boroughs, expands loans and grants for businesses hurt by COVID-19, helps individuals and families stay in their homes, and support workers' sense of stability and security by investing in wraparound services, including childcare, internet and computer access, transportation, food security, mental health, and financial empowerment that empower, provide security, and increase the ability to learn and earn. HF's network of Latino nonprofits is committed to continue to serve as a connector and a resource for workers and businesses in New York City and helping them access government support and providing those in need with educational, technical, and social assistance programs. Just to further elaborate, increasing flexible funding opportunities for community-based workforce development programs that provide wraparound services to meet the increased need and demand for workforce services from both New Yorkers and employers, especially small businesses, is critically important. This includes in funding adult literacy and immigration services to help address the needs of immigrant job seekers, encouraging grantees of city-funded workforce development programs to work with all community members, regardless of criminal history, increasing training and employment opportunities for green jobs, jobs that require digital skills, remote employment options, increasing access to childcare, and addressing transportation issues, and so on and so forth. Thank you for consideration. More recommendations are outlined in our written testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Larry Rothschild, followed by Karen Emas, and then Janice Quarles. Larry Rothschild, you may begin when the sergeants call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon. I'm Larry Rothschild, Director of Workforce Development at St. Nick's Alliance. St. Nick's Alliance supports over 13 members of our community each year with adult education, skills training, and job placement. Since the pandemic, we've really expanded our skills training to both adults and disconnected youth. We trained and placed over 320 in the last year in some critical areas in green training, construction, HVAC, environmental remediation, urban greenscaping, healthcare, PCT, CNA, HHA, and technology. We've added data analytics, IT help desk support, and customer service. And we've also added a big digital literacy for all. What we're looking for, we're in support of NYC ETC's proposal for the $250 million employment program with subsidized employment and employer engagement. There's two areas that are a big focus to us. We see a big need for internships. We do have internship support in a lot of our programs, but we're limited by DYCD allotments, often a 50% allotment, and we find that internships would be beneficial to all of our participants in building industry experience, both adults and young adults. So we'd like to see a growth there. And then, as mentioned by others, training stipends is really critical as our participants try to get through trainings that vary in length from about 7 weeks to 12 weeks or longer. And we feel that training stipends would be very critical for them to build their career pathway to success. And so that we're advocating for those areas that build on the support that we're providing through transformational coaching, workplace success, job readiness, and supportive services.
Thank you, Mr. Rothschild. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing none, we will move on to the next panelist. Next up, we'll hear from Karen Emas, followed by Janice Quarles, and then Michelle Sains. Karen Emas, you may begin when the sergeants call time.
Time starts now.
Thank you, Chair Farias, Chair Brewer, and council members. I'm Karen Emas with the Waterfront Alliance, an organization of 1,100 plus alliance partners committed to resilient and revitalized waterfronts. We look forward to working with this council and the new administration to ensure that New York Harbor and the city's 520 miles of waterfront are central to the economic recovery and well-being of New Yorkers. And we're heartened to see the city's new economic development blueprint acknowledges the role that climate resilient infrastructure and offshore wind can play to generate new pathways of opportunity for New Yorkers. First, we're pleased to see offshore wind highlighted so prominently in the city's new blueprint and encouraged by recent investments that position South Brooklyn Marine Terminal as a major regional offshore wind hub. New York City is home to extraordinary educational institutions that are positioned to train this workforce, but they will need additional resources, partnerships, and technology to create these pathways of opportunity. This means starting with the youngest students, such as vocational high schools, including the Harbor School, and up through higher educational institutions like LaGuardia Community College, Kingsborough, and SUNY Maritime. These homegrown institutions have the potential to create the next generation of researchers, scientists, engineers, as well as trade workers that are critical to offshore wind growth. Next, we urge this council and the administration to consider the maritime sector more broadly, beyond offshore wind, as a workforce driver. The maritime sector is rapidly evolving and changing with growing interest in ferry transit, cleaner vessels, supply chain, and moving goods on the water. Blue tech, for example, is the advanced technology sector of the maritime industry. And much like NYC EDC has invested in strategies for various tech clusters like fintech and biotech, we encourage the same level of attention to the blue tech sector through partnerships, incubators, and startup competitions. We also commend the administration for acknowledging coastal resilience projects in the Economic Development Plan. Infrastructure jobs focused on coastal and climate resilience projects are on the rise, from landscape architecture to coastal engineering to building retrofits. We can do more to lift up the city's working families through bold climate adaptation infrastructure investments needed for future climate risk. I've submitted more detailed testimony with more information, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you, Ms. Emis. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next panelist. Next up is Janice Quarles, followed by Michelle Sains. And just a reminder to anybody who is remaining, who is still not heard their name called or who signed up to testify, who's not had a chance to testify, please use the Zoom raise hand function and we will see about adding you to the list. So next up is Janice Quarles. You may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, and thank you, committee chairs and members, for holding today's hearing on workforce development. My name is Janice Quarles, and I'm an independent workforce development services consultant. I have worked with award-winning nonprofit organizations like the Brooklyn Navy Yard Corporation, the Hope Program, Rest Care Workforce Development Corporation, among other institutions. I was pleased to learn of Mayor Adams' Rebuild, Renew, Reinvent initiatives. And as we look ahead to the future, I believe Mayor Adams' vision will guide much of our work. I am glad that this administration is looking at workforce development as an intricate part of the city's economic recovery. Indeed, an adequate, trained, skilled, and motivated workforce is one of the foundations for the success of New York City economy as we look ahead. I want to express my support for the proposal of the New York City Employment Training Coalition to add monetary commitments to the vision put forth by Mayor Adams and Deputy Mayor Torres Springer. The coalition is correct in calling for additional dollars to support the New York City's workforce development ecosystems and to improve coordination with regard to existing funding streams. But perhaps there has been one item overlooked by the coalition concerning the skill sets of frontline workforce development professionals. In prior years, the focus of these individuals on the front line has been to provide job seekers with skills trained that connect the newly trained to employment and place them on the road leading to a career pathway. But COVID-19 has forced us to rethink and retool the efforts of the frontline workforce development professionals. In this recovery period, our long-standing placement and career pathway challenges are still present. The new challenges lie with how to incorporate coaching and mental health supports into the work the frontline workforce development professionals provide. In the years ahead, those of us in the field must be more than trainers and connectors. We must have the capacity to recognize the mental health challenges facing those we engage by strengthening the screening and diagnosis capacity of frontline professionals and provide them with coaching, counseling, and referral tools to help those we serve. In closing, as such a critical component of our workforce development efforts, in the future will lie with incorporating of mental health support infrastructure that has a specific workforce development focus. It is my hope that this administration recognizes the need for dedicated mental health resources as a revamp, reshape, and a reset of our workforce development ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quarles. If either of the chairs have a question for this panelist, feel free to ask it now. Seeing no questions, we're going to move on to the next panelist. Next up is Michelle Sains, followed by Catherine Merchek. And if, as a reminder to any remaining panelists, if you have not testified and you still wish to do so, please raise your hand now. Michelle Sains, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Thank you all for this opportunity to testify. I'm Michelle Sains, Senior Project Officer at The Working World. We're a nonprofit CDFI that specializes in providing financing and technical assistance to worker cooperatives. We're also a part of the Worker Cooperative Business Development Initiative, which you've heard a little bit about today already. And the initiative has been a very important part, very important to our organization and many others as we've grown to meet the new demand for this type of work. One of the Working World's main areas of focus here in New York City is cooperative conversions, which means taking an existing company and transitioning it to worker ownership usually through the buyout of the current owner. We usually meet with a business owner or a group of workers and facilitate that whole process, from having those initial conversations with stakeholders, to valuing the company, to financing the purchase, and then providing the necessary support and training to the new worker owners so that they can be successful business owners. As a result of this initiative, we've been consulting with businesses across all 5 boroughs in all kinds of sectors, from manufacturing to childcare to retail. In the coming months and years, some of these businesses will be functioning worker cooperatives that will change the lives of their new worker owners, giving them a new voice in their workplace and a share in the profits of the company. This pandemic has shown us just how vulnerable the economy is. As we emerge out of this pandemic, we can't just return to business as usual. We need an economy and an approach to economic development and recovery that centers people first. Worker cooperatives are a solution to that, and the solution is thriving here in New York City. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Sens. As a reminder, if anyone wishes to testify and still has not done so, please raise your hand now. If not, we will hear from our final panelist, Catherine Merchek. Actually, we have one more afterwards. Catherine Merchek, followed by Giselle Castro. Catherine Merchek, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Catherine Mersick. I'm a worker owner at Samam Kaya Yoga Back Care and Scoliosis Collective and a member of the Advocacy Council coordinated by Nick Knock, who you heard from earlier, which is a partner organization of WCBDI, which you also just heard about. You've heard about how City Council support of our community of democratically run businesses helps to protect and create jobs for women, immigrant workers, and communities of color across the 5 boroughs and in a wide array of industries. I'm testifying today to urge you to help NYC with a just recovery by continuing to support the great work of WCBDI by enhancing their funding to $5.01 million and to also support commercial rent stabilization for small businesses across the city. My co-op, Samam Kaya, is a beautiful little studio in Chelsea, specializing in the therapeutic applications of yoga and with the mission of making yoga accessible to all bodies. My 19 other worker owners and I have been democratically running the space in the same space for 7 years, which we had to borrow money to build out to our very specific needs. And we're so grateful that we've weathered the storm so far, and we're able to hold on to our physical space due to a variety of factors. We weren't eligible for financial relief from the city, but we did access PPP loans, and we were one of the few lucky small businesses that I know of who were able to negotiate our rent. However, I think the fact that we're cooperative had a major impact on our resilience. When we had to shut our doors, we banded together, we pivoted, decided how to change our pay and fee structures. We divided the labor of figuring out what to do. We discussed together how to keep the studio afloat while still allowing teachers who needed the work most to keep teaching online. Also, as members of the worker co-op community, we had access to certain small grants specific to worker co-ops and technical support from WCBDI partners. One of the grants we received was from Nick Knock's Cooperative Sustainability Fund that awarded us funds to pay for 10 sessions with a consultant from another co-op. And these sessions have been crucial to help us with some communication challenges and distribution of, I'll wrap it up really quick. Distribution of labor challenges that we were facing during the difficult transition to working online. And really happy to say we were able to reopen our physical space. We have both in-person and virtual classes now. And while we're still so grateful to still be afloat, our future is still uncertain because our new lease is going to raise the rent gradually over 10 years to get back to market rate, which is already too high, and our space is very small. We have limited opportunities for growth. So a fair and just system of commercial rent stabilization would help to protect our business and help all small businesses in the city plan for the future. I have a lot more in my written testimony. So in conclusion, please enhance WCBDI's funding and support commercial rent stabilization to ensure a just recovery in NYC. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Mertek. Next, we will hear from our final panelist, Giselle Castro. Ms. Castro, you may begin when the sergeant's call time.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to thank Chair Member Gail Brewer and also Chair Member Farias. It's so great to see everyone. I am Giselle Castro, the Executive Director of Exalt Youth. We work with young people who are court involved ages 15 through 19, and we focus as an organization on 3 very specific areas, which is criminal justice avoidance, academic progression, and employability through our career exploratory model. As an organization, we have been designed to create a culturally relevant and culturally responsive curriculum to ensure that our young people are making economic advancement. I think that it's important for me to note that within our internship model or internship component, Exalt has raised all of our funding through fundraising dollars to service and to provide our young people a stipend of $16 an hour to $18 an hour. And we have over 600 internship providers. And it is exciting, to hear and to understand, this new initiative, which is to advance many people throughout New York City. My focus are teenagers, and I did submit testimony which gives a stronger overview of the organization and what we have done and the impacts. But I would say that although we work with 15 through 19, we have a core component for our graduates. And as an organization, we just develop an alumni division and an alumni component to look at what is workforce development for our youth. We have partnered with Trinity Wall Street with an OSHA certification. We work very closely with CUNY. And also this organization, last year, we just launched an endowment to make sure that those young people who are interested in vocational training and also are interested in going to college, that they have the economic access to do so. I just want to thank everyone, this afternoon. I will pause because I know that we all have been sharing our unique experience.
Time expired.
Thank you so much. And my time expired as I was wrapping up and saying thank you and closing out. But once again, congratulations. And I'm very happy to have had the moment to speak this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. We'll now turn it back to the chairs for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you to everyone that came today with public testimony. I know that each of you are doing all of the good work in our communities with what you got, and I hear the call for more investments. It is truly the only way that we actually prepare our communities for meaningful employment while being able to meet them where they're at. Know that you have allies in myself and Chair Brewer. I quickly want to shout out Councilmember Kalman Yeager, who has stood this entire hearing. Thank you for sticking it out with us. And thank you to Commissioner Jackie Mallon of Small Business Services and Executive Vice President for Initiatives of Economic Development Corporation, Faye Penn, for showing up and testifying today. I look forward to working together and following up on our partnerships that can bolster workforce development in the city. Our priority is to create a citywide agenda on workforce, and I hope to hear from and work with our Office of Workforce Development in the future. I'll turn it over to Chair Brewer to close. Has she left us? Oh, no, you're on mute, sorry.
I want to thank Chair Farias for having a great partnership and for understanding this topic personally, professionally, and I know that she and I know Joe McDermott, and we all both learned a lot from him over the years. And I certainly want to thank Councilmember Yeager, who has not missed 1 minute of this hearing, and it is, again, much appreciated. I would say that this is a community of professionals, and certainly the fact that the folks from the folks who have the coordination of all of Annie, thank you very much for making that happen. The work that you did to bring everybody together is phenomenal, and Employment and Training is a wonderful organization, and we can rely on you. And there's not every industry has such an organization. So congratulations. Thank you very much. A lot of work went into this. Second, I think as I said earlier, this is the right time to be discussing this. Not only are we coming out of the pandemic, but there is in Washington, whether it's the current legislation that has passed or hopefully even more infrastructure, there is so much money available. I just chaired a discussion on that topic in Washington last week, and it's just grant after grant after grant to apply for. But you have to be, matching. You have to be ready. You have to have the sustainability locally to be able to do that. So I think this is a time to do it. I think, fortunately or unfortunately, the good news is that there is a blueprint. The bad news is it just needs a whole lot of work. And so it needs funding, as you heard earlier, but it also needs some kind of, not just coordination, but I think a redo. So as I said, I don't want it to be called the Office of Workforce, because that just means you're going to coordinate 21 agencies. You have to call it the Office of Talent, or figure out something that you have fewer agencies, more streamlined, and some of the issues that were brought up today get satisfied so that people have the kinds of jobs they need. There are jobs out there. There are 1 million people without high school degrees. We heard that today and we know it. And there are people who have language challenges. For goodness sake, this is the time to make those problems, those challenges, those barriers go away. This is not rocket science. And so we really need to be, take the challenge on. I hope in the city council, we can be a partner, and that we can end up at the end of 2 years or 4 years with not just a blueprint, but actual recovery that gives people the opportunities that they deserve. Thank you very much to the staff. You really have been phenomenal, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And right before we close, I'd just like to acknowledge Council Member Jennifer Gutierrez, who made it, but you're seeing us out. Thanks for coming. And I will now use my fancy gavel, who you can't see, to close us out. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.